I call this meeting to order. This is meeting number 36 of the Standing Committee on Finance. Colleagues and guests to take their seats, please. Thank you. Thank you. Pursuant to the order of reference of Tuesday, April the 8th, 2014, our committee is looking at Bill C-31, an act to implement certain provisions of the budget tabled in Parliament on February the 11th, 2014, and other measures. Colleagues, we have two panels here this afternoon. In our first panel, we have, first of all, Mr. Christopher Warswick, professor from Carleton University. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Welcome to the committee. We have from the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters, Monsieur Martin Lavoie. Bienvenue. We have from the Chartered Professional Accountants of Canada, Mr. Matthew Maguire. From the Fruit and Vegetable Dispute Resolution Corporation, we have Mr. Fred Weber, the President and CEO. And from the Office of the Veterans Ombudsman, we have Mr. Guy Parent, Veterans Ombudsman Chief Warrant Officer. Welcome to the committee. Each of you will have 5 minutes for an opening statement maximum, and then we'll have questions from members. I do apologize about the heat. We are trying to get that addressed, but Public Works should have it fixed, they say, by Monday. I'm being facetious. This is an ongoing challenge with us here in this Parliament. But anyways, I do apologize for that. We are trying to have that addressed. And we'll begin with Professor Warswick, please.
Okay. Thank you for the invitation to appear. I probably don't need the full 5 minutes, but I'll make a few comments on the proposed changes, and be happy to follow up with, during the question and answer period with more detail. So what I'd like to start with is talking about the regulations regarding the establishment of a system of administrative monetary penalties for the contravention of conditions applicable to employers hiring foreign workers. I see this as a very good change. I think, as I think everyone knows from the media coverage, there is a lot of concern about potential abuses by some employers. I think it may well just be a very small minority of employers, but the concern that I have and others share is that temporary foreign workers often value the jobs that they're receiving in Canada a great deal. It may be that the incomes they're earning are significantly higher than what they would get in their home country. And that creates sort of a power imbalance where I think some employers may see this and realize that they have the potential to extract some concessions from the original contractual arrangement. And how could that happen in practice? Well, we've seen examples of alleged cases of this in the news, but the kind of thing you could imagine is forcing temporary foreign workers to work unpaid hours, perhaps receiving effectively a lower wage than what they were promised, or perhaps forcing them to live in and pay for rental accommodation at above the market rates. So in general, I'm supportive of temporary foreign worker programs. I think they work better at the skilled end of the higher skilled end of the job distribution. I'm less supportive for low-wage jobs. But if we are going to do it, we have to be realistic that there are enforcement problems. And maybe it's only 1–2% of employers. It's hard to know. But I think we need a mechanism to sort of punish employers who do this. And this seems like a move in the right direction. The other comments are, I think the movement towards electronic filing of applications, I certainly support the government's movement in that direction. I think on the immigration front, we've suffered as a country trying to attract highly skilled workers by the long waiting periods that immigrants often have faced. So I think this is a movement in the right direction, and it does improve our competitive position sort of vis-a-vis the other major immigrant-receiving countries like Australia and New Zealand, who have had faster processing times. In terms of the termination of certain applications for permanent residence, in respect of which a decision as to whether the selection criteria are met is not made before February 11th, 2014. I'm generally supportive of measures that speed up this, the processing of applications. I see this as part of the government's approach in this area. With regard to the investor or entrepreneurial programs, I'm generally not supportive of this type of selection. So, I probably should have said this at the beginning, but my background is as an academic economist. I do research on immigrant selection primarily, and to a lesser extent on temporary foreign workers.
Okay, 1 minute remaining.
Oh yeah, sure, okay. And so, the empirical evidence really doesn't support investor class or entrepreneurial class immigrants being as successful as, for example, the skilled worker immigrants. Let me just sum up by saying that, in general, I think this movement to an expression of interest regime is a good move. I think it will be beneficial. So I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. Ensuite, Monsieur Lavoie, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I congratulate all the Boston Bruins fans for shaving their beard today. I still have mine. I will start my remarks in French and I will finish them in English. The
situation of the manufacturing sector has started improving since 2010 after the recession. A number of macroeconomic indicators do indicate that better days. For example, rate of plant capacity use has exceeded 80%, which leads us to believe that capital and manufacturing process expenditures will increase as the market picks up and companies start facing production capacity problems. If we look at investments in machinery and equipment that are an indicator of productivity, they've reached the highest level since the recession, that is $14.3 billion. This impressive performance is due in part to the accelerated depreciation tax measure of the federal government. We believe it is important for the federal government to keep a high acceleration depreciation for machinery expenditures in order to or machinery expenses in order to facilitate investments and productivity gains. The present rate of employment is in the manufacturing sector is 1.73 million, as opposed to 2 million in 2007. Exports in 2003 reached their level before the crisis, that is $3.9 billion. Expenses in research and development are somewhat more worrisome in view of the budget cuts that were made to the science research program and experimental research. This is somewhat predictable. They were near their economic low of 2010 and dropped compared to 2011 and 2013. This performance should not be improving in the short term because of the implementation this year of capital expenses, as well as the reduction of the tax credit from 20 to 15% for major corporations.
Concern for members in Bill C-31 or related to C-31. One that I would like to raise is to keep supporting the companies that are facing labor and skills shortage issues. While we agree that there should be no tolerance for abuse under the Temporary Foreign Workers Program, our members are concerned with the uncertainty right now with the program. We get calls from members asking if, am I still okay buying this next piece of equipment if I need to bring those foreign workers here to set it up and to get some training. So there's a lot of questions. Not all of them are necessarily touched by the current situation with the program, but there is uncertainty. Our members' survey indicate year after year that more than 50% of our members are facing skills and labor shortage, and most of them think the situation will get worse in the future. So one of our recommendations is to really make sure that we keep a foreign skilled workers program specifically for the advanced manufacturing sector. The second area of concern is Division 3, Part 6 of the bill that amends the Hazardous Products Act to implement the globally harmonized systems of classification and labeling of chemicals. CME supports the benefits of harmonization on safety data sheets and labels on products used in the workplace. Canada however, must make sure that all labeling requirements are fully harmonized with the U.S. so that companies do not have unnecessary costs related to relabeling products if there is a lack of harmonization. We also think that importers of chemical products should be able to label their products here in Canada without the obligation to label them in the country of origin prior to its importation, as currently required in the legislation. I'd like to say a few words on the Canadian International Trade Tribunal as well. Our members' competitiveness rely on high-quality assistance from the Canadian International Trade Tribunal to make sure that their competitors compete by the rules. Division 29 of Bill C-31 is proposing to remove the Canadian International Trade Tribunal's budget, its research staff and registry, and consolidate these into the Administrative Tribunal's Support Service of Canada.
1 minute.
The CITT already is, according to us, already the most efficient and leanest of operations. We believe the proposed changes will weaken the CITT's administrative and analytical capacity and have potentially negative repercussions on our international trade obligations at large. We recommend that the government remove the Canadian International Trade Tribunal from the list of tribunals covered by Bill C-31. Thank you again, and I look forward to receiving your questions.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. Next, Mr. McGuire, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Matthew McGuire. I'm the chair of the Anti-Money Laundering Committee of the Chartered Professional Accountants of Canada. I'm a CPA, member of the Department of Finance's Public-Private Advisory Committee on AML and ATF, and a partner at in the National Anti-Money Laundering Practice Leader at MNP LLP. We appreciate the opportunity to provide input on the amendments to the Proceeds of Crime, Money Laundering and Terrorist Financing Act, which are proposed by Bill C-31. My comments today focus on the issues relevant to accountants and accounting firms arising from the proposed amendments into certain areas where there were amendments we hope to see. The Financial Action Task Force, of which Canada is a member, released its updated recommendations in February 2012. We're concerned that the proposed amendments would not completely align the PCML-TFA with the expectations of accountants and accounting firms articulated in those recommendations. Particularly, FATF Recommendation 22 sets an expectation that anti-money laundering obligations for accountants should be triggered when they prepare for or carry out transactions for their clients concerning the following activities, which we believe should be covered. The first is the organization of contributions for the creation, operation, or management of companies, and the creation, operation, or management of legal persons or arrangements. One of the greatest challenges in complying with the anti-money laundering legislation is the determination of reasonable grounds to suspect in the case of a suspicious transaction report for money laundering or terrorist financing. Reporting entities need information to confirm whether their basis for suspicion of money laundering terrorist financing is valid in order to develop meaningful processes for risk and transaction monitoring following the submission of those reports. The amendment in the bill that provides FINTRAC the ability to make public their involvement in cases where they made disclosures and there was a prosecution is a laudable one. We think that it could be expanded to provide, to make public any details of suspicious transactions and their indicators that supported the disclosure and their characteristics, of course, without identifying the person that submitted it. That intelligence would surely help reporting entities from accountants to banks to credit unions to improve their monitoring and reporting practices. We're also concerned about the proposed Section 68.1 of Bill C-31. It would permit FINTRAC to file with the court suspicious transaction reports and other voluntary reports in the case of any action, suit, or legal proceedings brought or taken under the PCML-TFA. We submit in the case of such filings, the details about the reporting entity, the folks that submitted the report, should be sealed so not to discourage suspicious transaction reporting volumes and quality for fear of public scrutiny of those reports. Would also like clarity on the ministerial countermeasures, the regulations that support those countermeasures. The full range of possible countermeasures are not known, and therefore we're concerned about the practical extent to which our members are going to be able to design systems and processes quickly to adhere to them and the agility that they require in that respect. We would ask that any regulations supporting these measures would provide sufficient lead time for compliance with the directives. Common among reporting entity sectors, as I say, from banks to real estate brokers to dealers in precious metals and stones, is a frustration with identification standards, particularly in the cases where a client does not present themselves physically for identification. Altogether, the program of client identification is not proportionate to risk, is burdensome compared to the regimes in other countries, and it doesn't appear to be addressed in this bill. We understand, however, that the Department of Finance is addressing it in the course of regulations, and we fully support a move towards a more practical and risk-based approach to knowing who we're dealing with. In closing, we'd like to outline some of the changes we'd like to see as time moves on. Under the current regulations of the Act, an accountant means a chartered accountant, a certified general accountant, and a certified management accountant. When the unification of the profession is complete, across the provinces, we would like the Act to reflect that renaming as well as the change from the CICA handbook to the CPA Canada handbook. Additionally, we suggest that there are those in the accounting profession who practice in the accounting profession who are not provincially regulated, such as those with foreign accreditations, and we believe that they should be subject to the Act to address the money laundering risks they pose as well. We appreciate your consideration of the issues we identified today in the course of your review of Bill C-31 and would be delighted to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now hear from Mr. Weber, please.
Mr. Chairman and committee members, thank you for the opportunity to appear before the House Standing Committee on Finance to speak to the amendment to the Safe Food for Canadians Act to authorize the Governor and Council to make regulations related to fresh fruits and vegetables, specific the requirement to be a member of a specified entity or organization. This amendment would also repeal the Board of Arbitration. My name is Fred Weber. I am the President and CEO of the Fruit and Vegetable Dispute Resolution Corporation, commonly known as the DRC, and I'm here representing industry in support of both of these items. The highly perishable nature of fruits and vegetables makes commerce in these commodities unique. It is a credit to the industry that they can move a product whose shelf life is measured in days once harvested to Canadian consumers while it's still fresh and with maximum nutritional benefit. Because the product deteriorates quickly and supplies and quality can vary widely, licensing standards and specialized dispute resolutions have long been a part of the fresh fruit and vegetable business. The sector contributes $10 billion in economic activity to the Canadian economy and provides direct employment to 90,000 people. Because of Canada's climate and resulting short growing season, we must import much of our fruit and vegetable needs. You will not find many bananas and oranges growing here, particularly in February. A dispute settlement body which maintains a common set of trading standards helps make each party's rights and responsibilities clear and provides a forum for fair and ethical trading. A bit of history would be helpful here. From 1934 to 1974, the Canadian Board of Arbitration administered the licensing and dispute resolution program for shippers and receivers of fresh fruits and vegetables. In 1974, that board's statutory authority to provide rulings over disputes was challenged in court and proven illegitimate. In 1983, the Canada Agricultural Products Act was amended to partially reinstate the authority of the Board of Arbitration in strengthening license requirement. The Board still remained unable to rule on contract law disputes pertaining to non-payment and commercial contracts. This situation also created an imbalance with Canada's trading partners, particularly the United States, who allow Canadian sellers to utilize and benefit from the licensing and dispute resolution provided under the USDA's Perishable Agricultural Commodities Act. Canadian shippers from Canada are the only in the world who do not have to post a bond or other form of security to do so. Preserving this relationship was important to both Canadian and American business. A dedicated group of government and industry stakeholders organized a committee under the authority of Article 707 of NAFTA, which provides for the private resolution of commercial disputes. The organization that I represent is the result of those NAFTA organization negotiations. We are a not-for-profit corporation based in Ottawa. We provide education, trading standards, mediation, and binding arbitration to members. The DRC model is the model government and industry have evaluated and studied as the type of entity to provide the services contemplated under the pending Safe Food for Canadians Act regulations specific to trade in fresh fruits and vegetables. In 2000, the Canadian government recognized that the DRC met or exceeded the requirements of the Canadian Federal Produce License and Arbitration System and amended the regulations to state that DRC members were exempt from the federal license. Today, over 90% of Canadian buyers have opted for that DRC membership. For the last 14 years since the inception of the DRC, the vast majority of produce transactions have in fact been transacted utilizing the DRC membership rules and trading standards. There has been no use of the Canadian Board of Arbitration because the disputes are handled to conclusion by the DRC. In 2011, the U.S.-Canada Regulatory Cooperation Council committed to establishing comparable approaches to achieve a common goal of protecting Canadian and U.S. fruit and vegetable suppliers from buyers who default on their payment obligations. A portion of this initiative was the strengthening and streamlining of the licensing system and dispute resolution system in Canada. The DRC model was again identified as the potential solution for the licensing and dispute resolution process by stakeholders from both the U.S. and Canada. The work of the RCC in this area flowed into the portion of the Safe Food for Canadians Act we are discussing today. The DRC and its model for dispute resolution were identified and supported as the vehicle Canada would support based on the results of the exhaustive CFI consultation, which concluded in November of 2013.
1 minute.
This is not a surprise, as the vast majority of industry had already adopted the DRC into their business plans. Even though we are establishing an effective system for licensing and dispute resolution during the course of normal business transaction, one area where we are lacking and where we are out of sync with the U.S. is protection for suppliers in the event of a buyer bankruptcy or insolvency. This remains an outstanding issue for us, and we continue working with our partners in the RCC process. We are now looking at amendments to the Bankruptcy Insolvency Act in order to help us create a deemed trust similar to what exists in the United States to give suppliers of perishable fruits and vegetables a limited priority to access the funds generated from the sales of their products. Both of these amendments are the result of a wonderful collaboration between civil servants in government and industry. These amendments have been discussed at great length, and there's been great support for both of them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. Ensuite, Monsieur Perrin, s'il vous plaît.
Perrin. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'd like to thank you for inviting me to appear before the committee to share with you my views on Bill C-31, particularly the sections relating to Veterans Affairs Canada.
Explain why Veterans Affairs Canada needs to take other measures to improve the support provided to injured or ill veterans and families under the new Veterans Charter. Bill C-31 will provide many veterans, survivors, or dependent children with additional financial support as a result of government's decision to cease the offsetting of the Pension Act disability pension from other financial benefits, such as the earnings loss benefit, Canadian Forces Income Supplement, and War Veterans Allowance. The one-time payment for those benefits will provide retroactive compensation to cover the time frame from the date of the decision was made to cease the practice of offsetting to the date that Veterans Affairs Canada implemented the decision. Numerous veterans have called my office to complain that the short periods of retroactivity are not fair. They argue that the federal court settlement under the Manouche versus Canada case provides retroactivity back to 1976 for the Canadian Forces Service Income Security Insurance Plan, known as CISIP. Consequently, they believe that retroactivity for the affected Veterans Affairs Canada programs should be provided to the date the programs came into force. CISIP clients are receiving retroactivity going back to the start of the program because in the context of an insurance contract, the offsetting of the disability pension as income was unlawful. However, Veterans Affairs Canada was operating within the full context of the legislation. When confronted with the new understanding of the disability pension, policy change was made to amend the regulation to eliminate the harsh effect this policy was having on veterans. From an ombudsman perspective, there is nothing unfair about what has occurred. Although both situations appear to be similar, they are structurally quite different. À mon avis, il ne s'agit pas d'une question d'équité.
I do not believe that this is a matter of fairness. The reality is that the federal court decision did not specifically compel the government to change the way it offset the disability pension from Veteran Affairs Canada benefits, but government made the change anyway. There was also no obligation for the government to provide retroactively, but it did. This ensures that veterans are not penalized because of the length of time it took to implement the new policy. I believe that harmonization between Veteran Canada and the government of treating this offset will allow the government to treat veterans and their families equitably.
The most pressing shortcomings to address and the main source of discontent amongst veterans are those related to financial support. Adequate financial support is a key enabler to many intended veterans' outcomes, such as successful transition to a new civilian career, reasonable standard of living and quality of life, and improved physical and mental health. There are 5 main issues with the financial support provided under the new Veterans Charter. First, the insufficiency of the economic financial support provided after age 65 to at-risk, totally and permanently incapacitated veterans. Second, the drop of income for veterans who are transitioning from a military to a civilian career because the earnings loss benefit only pays 75% of their pre-release salary. Third, the accessibility to the permanent impairment allowance and permanent impairment allowance supplement is a problem for many severely impaired veterans. Fourth, the unfair practice of providing a reduced earnings loss benefit to part-time reservists who suffer an injury or an illness related to service. And the fifth financial shortcoming is the non-economic benefit designed to compensate for pain and suffering, the disability award. This benefit is supposed to have kept pace with civilian court awards for pain and suffering, but it has not. The shortcomings that have been presented to government through my reports and by the many witnesses that have appeared before the House of Commons and Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs over the past several months are impediment to achieving the Charter's core objective.
1 minute.
With a few focused improvements, the new Veterans Charter could become a system of benefits and programs that has a tangible and positive impact on all veterans and their families, a system that veterans can be proud of rather than the object of unabated discontent. In closing, I have a simple vision of what the new Veterans Charter should be, a well-integrated system of programs that provides the transitioning veterans with optimism for the future and for the new opportunities available to him or her. In other words, veterans should be able to look forward to the future with enthusiasm and with a sense of purpose rather than feeling overwhelmed with the present and longing for a past that is no longer possible. To create this optimism for all veterans, substantive improvement need to be made to the new Veterans Charter, and particular to financial support programs. Government has the opportunity to make a real difference for veterans and families by resolving long-standing problems with the new Veterans Charter. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We'll begin members' questions with Mr. Cullen. We can do 7-minute rounds on the first 4, if that's acceptable. Okay.
As long as I'm in the first 4.
Well, you're the first one.
I'm very enthusiastic with your proposal. Thank you to all our witnesses being here today. As you can see, just by your colleagues at the table, this is an incredibly diverse piece of legislation. The 5 of you would not normally appear before a House of Commons committee together, because we're going right through the gamut here, from veterans issues to the temporary foreign worker program to manufacturing and food and the challenges that we have with the process that you're now involved in is the massive and complex nature of this legislation and omnibus bill. The challenges that we'll have here today, and I won't take up any more time on this, is that in order to understand what the implications are, committee members from all sides of the House, I would say, are somewhat incapable of being able to anticipate what the impacts are going to be it from temporary foreign workers all the way through to our veterans. We'll try, but I remove any expectation that the House of Commons is doing a thorough job. Not possible. We also exist under time limitations. So, Mr. Warswick, I wanted to start with you. Much has been made of the temporary foreign worker program and the potential abuses as you talk about. We do see these things probably in a minority of employers that are abusing the system. And I mean that on both ways. Gaming the system to replace Canadians with temporary foreign workers because they just prefer temporary foreign workers rather than having a job given to Canadians for various reasons. And on the second side of abusing the workers themselves. There seems to be opportunities as the program is drawn up right now in which temporary foreign workers may be abused by unscrupulous employers, whatever the number. Can you offer us something, a fix on the first part that would prevent employers from gaming the system? We saw that with HD mining. We saw it with a number of examples that have made the news, where it just seems too easy, as the current program is designed, to simply make a quote-unquote effort to find a Canadian, not really try, and then simply bring in temporary foreign workers, which was the intention of the employer from the start.
Sure, I can try to address that issue. I think it's a difficult problem. I'll start off by saying I don't think there's an easy solution. I mean, the easiest solution is just not to have the program, but I think there are some benefits to the program. I did a piece for IRPP in Montreal last year where I looked at some of these issues, and I think what we need to try to do is to make it a program that's attractive to employers who have a really large benefit to bring in a temporary foreign worker, and not very attractive for those who only have a small benefit under the terms of the arrangement. So some kind of maybe sliding fee structure might create that kind of incentive, so that if you're a repeat user of the program, sort of like an experience rating structure like with EI, something like that could work.
Okay, so let's talk about the second side, and then I want to move on to another topic. But in terms of punishing bad employers, the Conservatives 2 years ago, as you know, announced a blacklist for employers who abuse the system. In 2 years, no one was put on the list. Up until a month ago, and I think a couple of McDonald's franchises, a couple of employers were thrown on when this really started to hit the news. So there was maybe coincidence, but I suggest not. Is there some mechanism that could be better used for those few employers who do abuse the system, abuse temporary foreign workers, in fact, that would prevent this from happening more in the future rather than some pretend blacklist or bad employers list that doesn't get used?
Well, without sort of commenting on the past, I mean, I think in principle, the decision last year to begin excluding employers, I think was a good move. And I think financial penalties are another way to go, but obviously it only works if it's fully implemented. So I think that can work. I think that employers will respond to those types of incentives, and I agree with what you said. I think this is a very small minority of employers in practice.
Yet the principles of Canadian law and human rights is that even in the small incidences, it matters to us all, right?
Of course.
So, Mr. Lavoie, you said a word that caught my attention in your presentation about uncertainty. To the manufacturing sector in Canada, speak to us briefly about the uncertainty that's been created, because as from my understanding, particularly the larger companies, resource-based companies, uncertainty is a word they don't want to use when they talk about government programs and services, because it has all these other effects.
Absolutely, and I mean, in our sector, if I can say, most of the temporary foreign workers are in positions that are highly skilled, and preference of our members would be to hire Canadians. It's just sometimes not possible. When we look at the data in Southern Ontario, there's been in advanced manufacturing about just over 5,000 positions, temporary positions in advanced manufacturing. In all sectors, 70% of them were in advanced manufacturing. 93% were under 12 months. It creates uncertainty because people hear a lot of things in the media, and they think that that we're going to put everybody in the same basket, from McDonald's to advanced manufacturing companies. So that kind of uncertainty. So our president wrote letters to some members of parliament, which I can send to you after, but that really calls for a specifically advanced manufacturing skilled workers program. We're even ready to fix certain above average wage threshold for temporary employment if necessary. We're not in the business of trying to get foreign employers to pay them less than what is in the Canadian market. So,
Thank you. Oh boy, 1 minute. All right, sorry, Mr. McGuire. I'm going to go to Mr. Baron. I want to understand this difference because we've had veterans talk to us about the fairness, that there's a potential lawsuit in the waiting because the clawback, which began in 2006, I think your suggestion is the government's not legally obligated to go even back to 2012 for this, the recompensation of this clawback to injured veterans. Yet the Manus decision in the case referenced the changes in 2006. Can you, sorry, Chair, I know. Can you speak to us about you're suggesting that it's fair is what's being done, or why are veterans, so many veterans contacting us saying the opposite?
Okay, just a brief response, please.
Certainly, what we're looking at is the fact that, yes, there was no obligation on the government to follow the court's judgment, because the court judgment was, in fact, a specific client base, which was the CISIP client, so that had to do with a new veterans charter and insurance under CISIP. The government of the time, and the government actually decided to look at the possibility, well, in fact, stopped all retroactivity, or not retroactivity, but all clawback from Veterans Affairs Canada payments, and at the same time looked at retroactivity. Well, I mean, you can see that the population that's affected by here is more than just the new veterans clients. We're talking about the War Veterans Allowance client as well. So we're talking about going back, 40, 50 years. So in the aspect of fairness, we think that the government have acted fairly. And we would rather see money that is, spent going forward to people that would be destitute at 65, rather than have the people that are now good means of living having more in retroactivity.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Cullen. Mr. Saxton, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to our witnesses for being here today. My first few questions will be for Professor Warshwick. Now, Professor, our government has introduced changes to the temporary foreign worker program to ensure that Canadians have the first chance at available jobs while cracking down on employers who abuse the program. Now, would you agree with the general direction of these changes?
Yes, I do. I think they're definitely a movement in the right direction. I still have some concerns that, as already indicated, that at the less skilled end of the occupational distribution or wage distribution, that this program could have negative effects. But I think this is a move in the right direction.
Okay. What would be your assessment as to the percentage of employers, approximate percentage of employers who might be abusing the TFW program or have abused it in the past?
I have no data to base that on. I would think it's less than 5%.
So it's low?
Yeah, I would say it's low.
Very low. So then you would agree that suspending the TFW program would hurt small businesses across the country and also hurt the economy. Would you agree with that?
I think if you suspended the entire program, it would hurt the economy, yes. I don't know how large that effect would be, but yes.
Right. So you believe the program is serving a worthwhile process and once reformed can be a good program?
Yeah, I think that just to really be clear, I think the temporary foreign workers who come in with, say, some form of post-secondary education, including skilled trades type qualifications, I think those are positions, the existence of those positions are beneficial. I think there may be negative consequences for the others. I think on net it's probably a positive.
Thank you. The expression of interest system improves how the government manages applications, resulting in faster and more flexible processing, while also increasing the labor market responsiveness of the immigration system. Moreover, the introduction of a two-step application process in certain economic classes will help prevent the accumulation of new backlogs by ensuring that only the best candidates, not simply the first ones, are able to apply to immigrate to Canada. Now, do you concur with the assessment that this new EOI process will speed up application processing while ensuring that Canada can attract the best skilled immigrants?
Yes, I think that that's highly likely to happen, especially given the fact that we've been so slow at the processes in the past. It's likely that it would speed it up. Whether it completely solves the problem is a different story, but I agree. Okay, and so the expression of interest system, you think, is a good route to take? Yes, I think it's going to make us more, it's going to bring in skilled workers more quickly, and I think it's going to help us compete with the other countries that are doing similar approaches.
Okay, thank you. My next questions are for Mr. Lavoie. Mr. Lavoie, our government introduced the Economic Action Plan to create jobs and grow the economy and to ensure prosperity. What measures in Economic Action Plan 2014 will help members of your organization compete in the global marketplace?
There's many measures that I think are very beneficial. This government has been very aggressive on trade agreements. That's really good news. I think CETA was great news for us. I think the next big one is the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So definitely this is a big one. I think in last year the extension of the accelerated capital cost allowance was also a good measure to improve productivity. Now this measure is going to end by 2015. We still think that we need to keep an aggressive depreciation rate for machinery and equipment, to at least to keep at par with the U.S. Depreciation.
Okay, thank you. Now, since coming to office in 2006, our government has cut taxes in just about every way that Canadians pay them, in fact, 180 different ways, and while reducing red tape for businesses as well, through initiatives like the one-for-one rule. Can you share your thoughts on the need to continue to cut red tape?
Absolutely. If you look, I travel across the country, meet our companies, and regulations and red tape is always in the top 3 issues that are raised with R&D tax credits and labor issues. So I think it's almost an ongoing battle all the time, right? Because a one-on-one rule is great, in principle. It's maybe more difficult to apply, but I think we're quite supportive of it, and we dedicate a lot of time looking at those and trying to get the feedback from our members as well.
Have you heard from your members what areas in particular they find most onerous when it comes to red tape?
Recently, in the last couple of years, it's all the changes introduced in the scientific research and experimental development tax credit. For example, the documentation requirements are much stronger than what they used to be, and a lot of our members only find out when they're audited. So we actually met with the CRA recently to convey that message to them and make sure they get the industry input and try to fix the way that they want to reduce red tape at the top of the pyramid, but want it to be translated in the technological reviewers on the floor, right? But that's one where a lot of our members think it's just not easy to apply and to claim your R&D tax credits, and all the changes in interpretations are very, very difficult to follow as well. So that's one area which is very problematic.
Okay, thank you very much. I have no further questions, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Saxton. Mr. Cuzner, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Great being here with my evil twin today. Mr. Lavoie, I'll have you know that you...
I'm much taller,
You sort of waded into some dangerous waters there. You'll notice the chairman is not only clean-shaven, but in a foul mood as well because his Bruins lost last night. So, but while I'm with you, Mr. Lavoie, between 2006 and 2012, the number of temporary foreign workers more than doubled in this country. Give me a profile of your organization where your members, how much your investment in skills training would have increased over that same period of time.
We don't have actual numbers on how much companies actually spend. What we hear a lot from our members in certain areas where, when all these, for example, if you take in engineering, for example, in some areas of the country where there's a lot of construction going on for natural resources extraction or oil sands, with the shipbuilding contracts coming in. So what I hear a lot is those companies, they're really worried if they put too much money into training and then they will lose the employees, right? So that's the one area, but at the same time, they invest a lot of time when they get somebody who's out of school that comes to their plant. What I hear a lot is that they're just not ready to work. Most of them have a very good theoretical knowledge of what of what they should be doing in the plant, but they've never worked with the equipment.
Okay, if I could, we only got 7 minutes here, but it's sort of an arse first approach to thinking that through whether or not you want to invest in training, and I agree wholeheartedly with the minister that industry should have more skin in the game, and I would think that it would be a worthwhile before we nobody's going to fight over some of the entry-level positions, low-skilled wages. But in a high-tech sector like your own, people are wondering, why can't we get somebody that was trained here, or somebody that's been with the company? Why aren't we investing in training to have them fill that position? So I would suggest that your industry should start to monitor the amount of dollars that they invest. I don't doubt that they invest, but I think it would be a good measurable. If I could, Mr. Perron, I'm just coming off something that Mr. Cullen had initiated, and I don't pretend to have a deep knowledge, but I have had interventions in my office on this. So if you could just clarify, there was no legal obligation, more so a moral obligation on the part of the government, and they fulfilled that moral obligation with retroactivity back to May 2012 in the wake of the Manouche decision. But what I'm hearing from people in my riding is that, why didn't they go back to when the charter was initiated in 06? So are you hearing those same rumblings? Is there a constituency out there advocating for that position?
I must say that we receive a lot of complaints every year, and we have received very few complaints in this matter. Although we have received some, I must be honest. But again, for us, it's an issue of compensation and not fairness, because the court case dealt with an insurance company and its clients, and quite different than the government program. And in the case of Veterans Affairs Canada, according to legislation, money was taken back from these allowances and there's an earnings loss benefit. When the government decided not to carry on with the clawback, our biggest concern at the time was that the government didn't move very fast in coming up with an answer that would actually, because there was a lot of expectations out there. Mm-hmm. So certainly we didn't, we thought it took too long to come up with a decision, and then once a decision was made, it took too long to come up with the details. But we are satisfied that it actually, meets the principles of fairness. I must say there's a saying in the ombudsman world that you must be careful not to pursue fairness in such a way that you disadvantage the others. And in this case, for us, fairness is to use the money that's available going forward to fund the programs that are now lacking, like 65, no income after 65.
Okay. Mr. Warswick, if I could, just with regard to the temporary foreign workers program, last week in response to a question, Minister Kenny replied that about the low-skilled stream for temporary foreign workers. He had said that Liberals began the program in 2002, and all the Conservatives have done since then will put on additional regulations and restrictions. I agree with half his answer. We did begin it in 2002, but to tighten the regulations, that's sort of in contrast to what Minister Finley said in 08, where she said, and I quote, "We are processing a record number of temporary foreign worker applications. We've made it faster and simpler for employers to hire a foreign worker." Which would you say would be closer to the genesis of the program? More restrictions and regulations have been placed on, or what some might think is Mr. Kenny has had to come in and sort of clean up the mess that Ms. Finley made?
I'm not an expert on the details of the history of that part of the program, but I do sense, certainly as has been already articulated, the program expanded quite significantly over the 2003 to 2010-12 period. So it doesn't seem like to me that things tightened up. It seemed like it expanded and became easier. That's my reading overall. Can I make a quick comment related to your previous question? Just
the investment in training?
Yeah, the training point.
Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the key things to keep in mind with temporary foreign workers is turnover, right? So we can say that, look, we've advertised this job, no Canadians have taken it, but a temporary foreign worker is prepared to come. Now, what you almost implicitly have with a temporary foreign worker is a worker who's not going to leave. Whereas I think for a lot of employers, the issue is I could bring someone in, I could train them, and 6 months later, a year later, the person's going to leave. And if employers are facing turnover, they're not going to be that likely to invest in training, I would have thought, on theoretical grounds. So I think that you know, my sense is this is one of the reasons why temporary foreign worker programs, if they grow too large, can be problematic, because even if they're equally productive, the employer is always going to want the worker who will stay.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Kuzner. Yep, that's it. Yep.
Me to continue.
I would, yes. You can go watch your Leafs play tonight somewhere. All right. All right, we'll go to Mr. Keddy, please.
Speechless. We'll leave the hockey analogies out of it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome to our witnesses. Yep. Interesting discussion here today. There's a Leaf comment. I'm still hurting on it. Okay. but Mr. McGuire, in your role with the Chartered Professional Accountants of Canada and chair of the Anti-Money Laundering Committee, you've had a chance to look at what we've done in this budget, I'm sure. But, you know, the Proceeds of Crime, Money Laundering, Terrorist Financing Act, and there's a number of changes to that embedded here, are certainly important for the Canadian government and to collect taxes that have been delinquent and deliberately not paid, and to really look at international crime and terrorist activity. So we've put in a number of amendments here. First of all, we strengthen the customer due diligence standards, including for politically exposed foreign and domestic persons. We've closed the gaps of the regime, such as online casinos, persons and entities that deal in virtual currencies, foreign money services businesses. We've improved compliance, monitoring, and enforcement. We strengthen information sharing. For instance, we allow FINTRAC to disclose to federal partners on threats to national security. We've repealed the regulation making authority pertaining to the ministerial directive power under Part 1.1 of the Act in order to bring Part 1.1 into force, and other technical amendments there. Understanding the nature of what we're dealing with and the underground activity that we're dealing with and the difficulty of dealing with that, in your assessments, I would hope you think these amendments go some way in the right direction to actually dealing with this type of criminal activity. But is there anything else we could add to that list?
Thank you very much for your question. I do agree that the amendments go a long way in the right direction, and one of the important things from my perspective is how far do the amendments go to align with the international standards, and exactly. I would say they get us almost all of the way there. Okay. Where I think that we should focus going forward is on effectiveness. This next evaluation, that the FATF is going to evaluate Canada's measures to control money laundering, and by most estimates, about $55 billion is laundered through Canada every year. They're going to be evaluating our not just whether or not our program conforms to their standards, but whether or not we're achieving the things that we look to achieve. So there are two things that I think are important in that regard, and the first is the ability to track our effectiveness, and the second is a greater emphasis on civil forfeiture regimes. So in terms of I'm not sure I'd comment on budget measures themselves, but Budget Implementation Act measures, but I do think more resources in Canada should be put into the prosecution side of things and the civil forfeiture side of things. At the moment, we have the equivalent of a fire hose going into a garden hose. FINTRAC is producing incredible intelligence and thousands of cases, and we need to be able to act on them in an appropriate way.
Thank you. Mr. Weber, you raise a number of points, and most of them really involve more ongoing discussion about harmonization with Canadian regulations and American regulations. You represent the fresh fruits and vegetables, that perishable group. Do you also represent other perishables like, and I'm talking the fresh fish industry, Christmas trees?
No, sir. It's strictly related to fresh fruits and vegetables.
Has there ever been any consideration of expanding that? And in my part of the world, Mr. Cuzner could concur, you know, fresh fish crossing the border out of Atlantic Canada into the U.S., typically one load in every 70 or 80 will be stopped for a compliance check. That's a serious problem with a load of fresh fish. Most of the time we don't lose the entire load, but sometimes we lose a portion.
When the DRC model was put forth originally under NAFTA, a portion of our charter, I hate to say required, but it did require that we be open to look at other commodity groups. We were approached by a couple of firms in Mexico regarding sugar and coffee. Those were never followed up on. It is certainly something we could expand into. I think the fruit and vegetable part of it is strictly because both the U.S. and Canada have had these kind of rules in place since the 30s.
And could you give me some idea of how long it actually, your dispute resolution, how long it would take? Because if you have a tractor trailer stopped at the border, you've got a high value product on there, hours are important.
The vast majority of our cases are a quick phone call. We handle hundreds, if not thousands, every year just by talking to people about what the right thing to do is. Probably the strength of what we do, though, is it's the default rules that kick in for members. There are times when there is that delay at the border and maybe it's been out of refrigeration for a period of time, and it may no longer be suitable for a supermarket to bring that in and put in a dry tray. So a lot of what we do is work with the parties to get that product to a secondary marketing chain so that we can mitigate the loss. So the actual disputes that we have on paper that go to an arbitrator are really very few. But even those, on the smaller cases that are less than $50,000, it's usually 90 days from the time it comes through our door till there's a written enforceable decision. The ones that are for more money obviously take a bit more time because we're required to have a hearing, bring in a little more well-trained arbitrator. But the vast majority of what we do is work with the parties to very quickly resolve it amicably online. It really is a great industry. I like to say it's the last bastion of free enterprise. People want to do the right thing.
Okay, thank you. Nope. Thank you very much, Mr. Kelly. Mr. Caron, pour 5 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Mr. Caron, 5 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to thank all our witnesses for coming. I have a question for Mr. Worswick to start off. Yesterday we heard from a specialized researcher from Simon Fraser, Dominic Gross. She said that there were certain problematic elements for the temporary workers program, namely the poor quality of the information that is available on the labor market. I'd like to know whether you would agree with this claim.
Dominic's work. I think, you know, the issue there, as I understand it, is that it's just very difficult to know. Like, so if you think about the process, the employer advertises a vacancy at a particular wage, and nobody, if no one applies or no one suitable applies, then they can approach the federal government for a temporary foreign worker. And then I think the issue is how do we decide whether that wage is appropriate or not? And so my understanding of Professor Gross's idea is that if we had better information, then we have better estimate of what that local wage for that particular occupation is. And I'm sure we could improve in that regard, but I think it's also a difficult thing to do.
You seem to be in agreement with her on another element, and namely the fact that if companies are not successful in obtaining Canadian workers in a different sector, and the sectors vary one from the other, if not able to find qualified Canadian workers, in many cases it may be because the wage is not high enough. Therefore, allowing easier use for foreign workers, there's a downward pressure created on salaries. Canadian workers are likely to accept wages that would not necessarily be as low.
Saying One thing I'm certainly comfortable saying is it's hard to see with a large temporary foreign worker program, it's hard to see how you get wage growth, right? So you imagine a situation where the economy is growing, wages should tend up. If employers always have the option to bring in temporary foreign workers, I think at the very least it'll slow wage growth. The bigger question is whether it depresses wages, actually causes real wages to go down. My belief is it can, but I don't think it always does.
Et dans le cas qu'elle utilisait, effectivement, elle est arrivée à des conclusions que non.
And there were certain conclusions, namely that this does contribute to maintaining the unemployment rate at the level that where it was. There were pilot projects in British Columbia and in Alberta, and that does have a downward effect on wages. Last question, I'd like to know whether you are in favor of the implementation of application costs for temporary workers. I believe that's $275. Dominic Gross was saying that it should be much higher, taking the European model. There are some programs that work quite well in Switzerland, for example. Do you think that these fees should be higher?
I think we should look at raising them, but as I said earlier, you know, I wouldn't do it like a fixed fee across the board. I think I think Monsieur Lavoie mentioned something earlier about employers being willing to pay more to bring in qualified temporary foreign workers. I mean, one way to think about this is instead of saying you have to pay the temporary foreign worker more, you could have to pay a significant fee, maybe $1,000. I don't know what the right number is. I suspect it's above $275. And we could you know, if you want to think about, do we really want to take that money out of the economy, you could rechannel that into training or some use to try to solve the underlying reason why we need temporary foreign workers in the first place.
Monsieur Lavoie, rapidement.
Mr. Lavoie, quickly, you do have small and medium-sized business, 85%. I remember that you appeared before this committee. You were in favor of the tax credit for hiring, and this tax credit will not be renewed. What will the consequences be for your members? This is a tax credit that was certainly much appreciated. I cannot really measure the impact of what its cessation will be. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being here. Mr. Weber, I'd like to start with you, and I've had folks from the perishable and fresh fruit visit my office the last couple of years, and having a large table stock potato business in the riding. I just wanted to ask you a little bit about, you talked in your concluding comments a little bit about the lack of the risk of non-payment, especially on the side of bankruptcy and other things, and how the U.S. system is a little better than the Canadians when it comes to that. And this first part of it, this harmonization, was one kind of pillar that the folks talked to me about. How much of a problem is that lack of payment to our sellers here in Canada, and or going in that way? And does this harmonization pillar get us on the right road to tackling that next?
A bit of a clarification. As you say, there really are two pillars here. The first pillar is dealing with slow pay, no pay contract issues between solvent businesses.
Right.
What we're talking about here will get us a long way toward resolving that problem with our neighbors around the world, quite frankly, but particularly the United States. In terms of the second part of this, when there is an insolvency, it is a trade irritant. I will say that. It is beyond the scope of the amendments we're talking about here today. But the trade irritant is the fact that since 1984, Canadian sellers have been able to go into the United States and be treated exactly the same way as U.S. firms are. So when there's a bankruptcy, the sellers, and it's a very, very limited trust, I want to stress that. There's been a lot of miscommunication out there about that. What it really does is it traces the accounts receivable through. So if the buyer goes bankrupt and he took your potatoes and he sold your potatoes, they try to find that receivable from the potatoes and bring it back to you. Right. What we've accomplished here in Pillar 1 will help, but without the trust or some similar tool that will help equate that, I think it will remain a trade irritant simply because Canadians are getting something for free.
Okay, so I'm glad we got the first part of it anyway, at least the solvent companies, and I know we have to do some thinking about tracing those receivables. It's a kind of an interesting thing. Mr. Lavoie, you're the second person who's brought up the full U.S. harmonization and labeling issue. It came up the other day in the committee meeting, and it was talking about labeling in Canada versus prior to importing. And I just wanted to ask, I think Mr. Keddy brought it up the other day, is when he offered the alternative, is it better to handle that through an amendment, or can that be handled by regulation instead? And I think the reply back to that question was regulations could handle it. So I just would like to get your opinion on that.
I agree. Regulations could handle it, and because we feel also a lot of pressure to get that bill passed, because the June 1st, 2015 is going to be the implementation. So I would say yes, could be handled by regulations.
Okay, so that's a good alternative. Mr. McGuire, I'd like to go to you. You talked a little bit. I was intrigued by your comment with respect to 68.1 in FinTrack and the seal, the reporting entity, and you talked a little bit about the protection, being able to protect the reporting entity on that. And I wondered what specifically were you thinking about, of how, did you have a specific amendment in mind on that that would protect that reporting entity, and what was your thought there?
Yes, sir. Thank you. The idea is simply that, a suspicious transaction report is a point at which a financial institution or an accountant gets to the point where they say the client that they're dealing with, they suspect them of money laundering or terrorist financing. It's a threshold. They get it, and they describe in fair detail within the suspicious transaction report what they found suspicious and the basis of suspicion and what they've done about it. It also can reveal a fair bit about the mechanisms the institution used to detect the behavior in the first place. And so, in my view, that information becoming public could be detrimental in a whole number of ways. In the U.S., we've seen lawsuits started by the subjects of the reports against the institutions who filed them. I think that there must be a mechanism to either summarize the information in the suspicious transaction report, or otherwise redact it or anonymize it for the purposes of those proceedings.
So just really quickly then, the idea of what you were saying in terms of a change would be just to say that there would be a wording in there to protect those actual entities. It would just say there'd be no reporting or something like that?
That's right, to redact the information related to the reporting entity that submitted in the first place.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. So am I starting with Mr. Cohen or Mr. Rankin?
Yes, please.
Mr. Cohen, please.
I wanted to thank you to Mr. Rankin. I just want, not for our witnesses, but for committee members, I wanted to give committee members a heads up that we'll be submitting a motion not on C-31, but to bring the Minister Kenney to committee to talk about the temporary foreign worker program. We're hearing a lot of testimony on it, Chair, and I think it would benefit the committee. I know it's a moving target for the Minister as well. He's spent some time making modifications or cancelling or suspending certain aspects of the program. And more and more I'm of inclination that the Finance Committee would do well to hear from the Minister for some short time, depending on his availability. I'm just giving committee members a heads up on that.
Okay, thank you. Go to Mr. Rankin now, please, for your round.
Thank you, and welcome witnesses. My first question is for Professor Wurswick. Thank you very much. Back in October, you did an economic analysis, a paper that you wrote in. In your paper, you commented on the changes made to the program, the Temporary Foreign Workers Program last year, and on the fact that the government created a blacklist to suspend employers who misuse the program. We know that as of today, there are only 4 companies on the list, and all of them have been added in the last couple of weeks. In light of the numerous concerns of abuse that have been raised across the country, for example, Alberta alone has seen 100 cases of abuse, do you find that the enforcement of those provisions has been stringent enough?
It's hard for me to say. I mean, certainly historically we've had a significant problem of enforcement. I do think that to be fair, I think the changes that Minister Kenney have implemented have been, as I've said, in the right direction. I can't really. It's hard for me to comment on whether there, should have been more firms on the list. Probably, but I just, I think we have to be realistic about the situation in that. The people who know about the abuse are the temporary foreign workers, and they don't have a very good incentive to bring it to light. And so that's definitely a challenge for the government. I think the idea of blacklisting firms is, at least the threat of it is essential. I think the threat of financial penalties is essential. How it's implemented, I don't know.
Well, having a threat that's credible, obviously, in most enforcement regimes is seen as important. You also, in your October paper, stated as follows, and I quote, "Considering the large global pool of less skilled workers, many of whom might willingly come to Canada to find work, increasing flows of TFWs could have significant negative consequences for less skilled Canadian workers." Close quote. What kind of negative consequences were you referring to, and by what mechanisms would they come to be?
Well, you could imagine a scenario in which, I've already mentioned that it could eliminate wage growth for these workers, and we haven't had a large amount of wage growth over the last 30 years in Canada. So, if every time that we see wages going up, if the firm continues to advertise at the past wage or the current wage without accounting for the growth, then you could see a situation in which these workers really don't see a wage increase.
So you're saying essentially, in simple terms, that it has the effect of wage suppression, wage growth suppression.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, my next question is for Matthew Maguire of the Chartered Professional Accountants Association. In your written paper that you presented, you say this, and I quote, you first of all say, "Common among reporting entity sectors is a frustration with identification standards, particularly in cases where the client is not physically present at the time of identification. Altogether, the program of client identification is not proportionate to risk, is burdensome compared to the regimes in other countries, and that the situation does not appear to be addressed in this bill." I wonder if you could elaborate on those comments.
Certainly. So increasingly, as you might expect, interactions for financial services and otherwise take place where you don't meet the client face-to-face and press palms. It happens in online environments and over the phone and in any number of other ways. At the moment, the way it's set up is the non-face-to-face measures require reliance on for one, reliance on 6 months of Canadian credit history. And so you can imagine a new Canadian coming in not having that credit history and not being able to satisfy that requirement. And then second of all, there's the sufficient condition. So that's the necessary condition is some sort of a reliance on a Canadian credit history. The sufficient condition is you have to prove that you have a Canadian deposit account or clear a check. These combinations of method rely on old systems, are slow, and sometimes can become frustrated. And in the case of a credit check, if there's not an exact match of the address, for instance, the whole identification can be frustrated.
Well, you comment then that it's burdensome compared to regimes in other countries. How do our other countries do it better than Canada?
Other countries are relying on the new technologies that are available to be able to identify. There are even private sector initiatives where you can evaluate the credibility of a passport by electronically scanning it. There are any number of mechanisms.
Will addresses that concern?
I think it needs to provide for a risk-based approach that leaves much of the decision-making up to the financial institution that is in the place to understand.
But there's nothing in this bill to address your concern.
Thank you.
No,
thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rankin, Mr. Van Kesteren, please.
Mr. Warswick, I think I'm going to go with you. I want to talk some economics. You said, and I'm going to quote you, "The reason employers choose to bring in foreigners rather than hire local youth is the elephant in the room in the debate around temporary foreign workers." Warswick said, and it has to do with work ethic. I got a son. He's pretty sharp. He says, you're a little suspect of evolution. He says, "Dad, if we'd evolved," he says, "I think we would have turned out to be like a big old snake. About 1 meal a week or 1 meal a month, just lay around, don't have to do a whole lot. Instead, about 3 times a day, I'm hungry, and it just kind of reminds me, got to get up, got to get back to work." And I remember as a kid, I'm a little older than you probably, but you probably have the same memories. When as a kid in my neck of the woods down in southwestern Ontario, there's a lot of farming goes on there. We couldn't wait till harvest time or the spring or the fall, and because if we wanted to wear blue jeans when we went back to high school, we had to make a little bit of money. And I'm wondering, it's somewhat ironic, the very people that criticize the foreign worker program the most are the ones that have implemented these things that have caused them. I'm just wondering if you wanted to comment on that. And one final thing, an observation as I was thinking, we always have had foreign workers. I mean, we used to call them immigrants. I mean, back again in my day, they were, people would come into this neck of the woods, and I know our friends from Quebec were the ones that picked the tomatoes, and we just had this steady supply of people, but we've run out of that. Is there any turning back? Is there a way that we can get out of this?
There's a lot there to talk about. Let me make, I am very much making a distinction between immigration and temporary foreign workers. I think they're two very different programs.
It served the same purpose back years ago.
Well, I think they both still serve the same purpose in the sense that they're both sources of labor supply or labor services to our economy. But with immigration, we're making a commitment to bring a person in and allow them to stay permanently. And we typically do this without any requirement. Well, there's a small employer nomination. Traditionally, there's been a small employer nomination track, and it is now likely to grow. But historically, we haven't said, you can't come unless the employer says they can't replace you. I do think they're different. I think the movement towards temporary foreign workers is quite recent, with the exception of the agricultural worker program. When you mentioned the migration of young workers from Quebec into other parts of the country, that was an important source of labor to the agricultural sector. I have no problem with that. I believe in free mobility of labor within Canada.
Coming anymore. That's the point I'm making. They're not coming. The kids aren't going into the fields,
right.
And so
But I guess what I would say is it depends on the wage rate, right? So, I think if employers pay a high enough wage, they will find a supply of local labor.
But you're an economist, and we both know that when we start messing around, when we start doing things, there's always ramifications. And you must agree that we have industries, that we've created industries, that we've agreed that they're critical to our region. They're spin-off, and we consider that spin-off as the reason for that. But we are competing with, say, the Americans, who have a huge pool of labor from Mexico, in terms of migrant workers or illegal immigrants. So have we put ourselves in a corner? I guess that's a question I'm asking, where we really have no choice. I'm talking about the low end of this spectrum.
I firmly believe we have a choice. I think that if I'm not advocating this, but we're talking hypotheticals. If we hypothetically decided to stop temporary foreign workers for less educated workers, it would hurt some individuals and some firms. I don't think it would have a large impact on the country.
But it would wipe us out, say, in Chatham, Kent, Essex, in the Leamington area. They solely rely on the foreign or the farming. Like we've gotten to that point now where we must have that pool of labor.
I guess, rightly or wrongly, I know we don't have much time, I would probably exempt the agricultural sector because I don't see big problems in it. It's a bit of a cop-out, but we've had that program for a long time. Most of the stories don't seem to be coming from it, but I take your point that might be hard in certain regions.
It's too bad we don't get more time, because I think we could talk about this for a long time.
Yeah.
So,
okay, thank you, Mr. Van Kesteren. I'm going to take the final round, and I appreciate a lot of the clarification by many of you and your suggestion for amendments. I wanted to follow up in the time I have with Mr. Lavoie. You said in your statement, our member survey indicate year after year that more than 50% of manufacturers are currently facing skills and labor shortage. That's certainly what I hear in my region. It's certainly what I hear from a lot of business organizations. And yet, there have been many national studies done. C.D. Howe Institute, Parliamentary Budget Officer, TD Economics, which is essentially saying there is no national labor shortage whatsoever. This is a problem that has been overblown in terms of its attention. So what is your response to that? I mean, because it's certainly not the reality I face in my riding, but my riding may be an anomaly. So as a business organization and your members across the country, how do you respond to those kind of reports?
I would say if you talk to colleges and polytechnics around, and you ask them how many people they take in their programs, what's their rate of placement, A lot of them are approaching like above 95%. They tell us that they have more application than what they can take. They could place more people. So I don't know how to reconcile these numbers, but what I hear both from my members and from applied research and colleges is really in line with what we're hearing from our members. So I can't say how I can reconcile why they're saying that or why they think there's no problem. I don't see why our members would say so if it wasn't a problem. But as I said, labor and skills shortage is one of the top issues I keep hearing all the time across the country.
It's one of the top issues consistently you hear from
consistently with research and development as well.
And are there certain sectors within the manufacturing coalition that face bigger challenges than others?
Yeah. It's pretty broad. It's not in one particular sector. I mean, we even heard it recently from the food processing sector. We've heard it from the metals and the plastics and the natural resource related sectors as well. Construction related to manufacturing. We've heard it in a lot of different skilled trades for sure.
Okay. And in my remaining time, I wanted to go to Professor Warswick, and I come from Alberta. I represent Edmonton-Leduc, which has areas like Nisku, which is suffering from a real shortage of all types of labor. Just getting your recommendation on the temporary foreign worker program going forward. If you look at the three prairie provinces, I'm going off memory, but I think for 2013, the unemployment rate for Saskatchewan was 4%, for Alberta was about 4.6%, for Manitoba was 5.5%, Ontario and Quebec were around 7.5, 7.6%, higher in Atlantic Canada. So obviously we have different regional realities in this country. So we're facing a bigger challenge we are in the prairies than they are in terms of accessing labor. Should we have a temporary foreign worker program that recognizes that different regional reality and says employers in regions where it's 4% unemployment ought to be perhaps facing a different reality than employers facing 11.5% unemployment?
I support that kind of direction. I do think, and I've sort of made this point clear, I think, in other venues, is that I think that temporary foreign worker programs make a lot of sense in booming regions of a country, where you might have to see very large wage increases in order to attract workers from the less successful regions. And especially with something that might be related to a commodity cycle where the boom might not last forever, do you really want to attract a bunch of people across the country who might have to go back again to communities that have been hurt? So I do support a limited temporary foreign worker program. I like the idea of focusing it on more skilled and educated people because I think the supply responses are smaller there because you might have to wait till someone finishes their training before they can really enter that area. And targeting it at regions of the country that are booming makes sense.
And would you, in just my remaining time, would you also favor perhaps considering other measures such as saying, a lot of employers who approach me say 5% of my employees are temporary foreign workers, so 95% are Canadian citizens or permanent residents. Is it fair for the government to say a certain maximum percent of your employees is temporary foreign workers, thus you ensure that that employer is hiring the vast, vast majority of people who are Canadian?
I think that is a good idea. It's something I've considered, and I don't know what the percentage is, but I think in situations where 100% are temporary foreign workers, I would think that would raise alarm bells that this might be a questionable enterprise in this regard.
I think, to put it mildly, yeah, that would be. Okay. Well, my time is up. I will cut myself off as I do others. I want to thank you very much for being with us here this afternoon, contributing to our discussion on Bill C-31. Colleagues, we're going to take a couple of minute break. Before I do, I've passed around the budget for Bill C-31. Could I get someone to move this budget? Okay, moved by Mr. Cullen. All in favor? Okay, thank you so much for that. Thank you again. We'll suspend then for about 5 minutes here. Thank you. I call this meeting back to order, meeting number 36 of the Standing Committee on Finance, continuing our study of Bill C-31. I want to welcome our second panel here. Again, I apologize for the heat. We are endeavoring to address that. If you wish to become a little more comfortable, I would recommend that. But we want to welcome here, first of all, we have as an individual, we have Ms. Sandra Nelson. Welcome to the committee. We have the Canadian Museums Association, Mr. John McAvity. Welcome back. From the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, we have Mr. Gregory Thomas. From PEI Mutual Insurance Company, we have Mr. Blair Campbell. And from the Progressive Contractors Association of Canada, we have Mr. Sean Reid. Thank you all so much for being with us. You have each 5 minutes maximum for your opening statement, and then we'll have questions from our members. And we'll begin with Ms. Nelson, please.
Thank you. We sit before you today as proof the TFW program is broken. I am Sandy Nelson, and with me today is Shauna Jennison-Young, 2 waitresses from Weyburn, Saskatchewan. Further to our brief, which you have already received, the following points highlight our concerns. An employer such as ours can simply restructure his business and discharge all staff, keeping only the people he wants by saying, "We offered jobs. They didn't want them." Clearly, in our case, jobs were not offered to us, and we believe all staff did not receive the notice of discharge. If this was the case, was Service Canada notified? Were new LMO contracts applied for, and were ROEs issued? This, to us, is a blatant abuse of the federal guidelines. The same guidelines state TFWs or LMOs should be laid off first in times of work shortage. Secondly, I myself in January of 2014 lost 20 hours a month to the then TFW and was told she needed her 40 hours per week. Thirdly is the question regarding TFWs coming here to do specific jobs. Is it not against the rules to have someone hired as a waitress server to then work in housekeeping while the restaurant was under construction without a change to the contract? Also, a TFW cook is dishwashing part-time and has taken hours from a Canadian dishwasher to ensure her 40 hours a week are filled. This particular Canadian is now getting at most 9 hours a week. On the hotel side of the business, is it not against the rules to have housekeepers going to the boss's homes to do chores such as yard work and cleaning? Also included in their duties is the cleaning of boss's vehicles. This is paramount to slavery, and as contract workers, they simply oblige. Next, we would like to discuss the LMO itself. Shauna saw firsthand a Canadian applicant applying for a prep cook job sit and wait to speak to the boss for an hour. The applicant seemed qualified and was eager for a job. After talking with the boss, the young man left. The boss, Harry, then tossed the application aside, explaining to Shauna the job had to be posted in order to get an LMO for a brother-in-law of a current employee from the Philippines. This was the norm, as people did apply for jobs in all categories of the hotel, including housekeeping. There needs to be safeguards for Canadians such as ourselves. The media was a last resort for us as we first contacted Labour Standards, Human Rights, Program Integrity Services, and the Office of Jason Kenney. We did meet with Dustin Duncan, our local MLA, and although he would do what he could, his hands were tied. There needs to be more information readily available to Canadians regarding reverse discrimination they may be experiencing in their workplaces. There needs to be more than a telephone number to report abuses. Even a lawyer can't help in regards to this program, since it is a federal program and there are no laws or any legislation to address these issues. We believe as well that what our boss did in the discharging of all employees was done at this particular time to indeed protect one TFW who had just recently obtained landed immigrant status. The other employee discharged along with us, a cook, has been here for approximately 7 years and still has only landed immigrant status, which for him is good enough. He could become a citizen, but as he says, he has an open permit to work for 5 years, and the only right he hasn't got is the right to vote. We don't know how many keep just their landed immigrant status, but that should be an interesting statistic to know. We believe reasons more people don't speak up include not knowing what their rights are, no one to actually handle complaints, and having others turn it into a racist issue. It has been quoted time and time again, the government will not tolerate employers who hire foreign workers when Canadian workers are available and willing to do the same jobs. Yet here we are. The province has started an investigation, and for that we are grateful. However, they can do nothing as it pertains to this program. We have yet to hear from any person from Jason Kenney's office, even though there is to be an urgent investigation. There must be a tightening of these rules immediately. We sit before you today. Maintaining this program is severely broken. We hear talk of stiff fines, suspension for rule breakers, and severe consequences for abuse. We ask, where is it? We would dare anyone to read our brief and tell us our former employers did not break the rules. As Canadians, we feel unwelcome in our own country. This is unfair not only to us, but also to the vulnerable temporary foreign workers now in this country. As an addendum, I would like to add that we did get an email from Jason Kenney's office on May 13th regarding our email from April 7th. As noted in the letter, no information will be divulged due to privacy issues. So none of our questions will be answered, and it is apparent that we will not be interviewed or be a part of this investigation. We cannot understand why, as complainants, we would not be a part of an official investigation process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Nelson. We'll now hear from the Canadian Museums Association.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the interests of time and temperature, I will try to be under the 5-minute line. We're very pleased to be here. I'm John McAvity, the Executive Director of the Association, and we have approximately 2,000 not-for-profit museums and galleries all across Canada, which welcome about 60 million visitors each year. So they're enormously important and spread out from large metropolitan cities to small rural communities. They're also extremely popular and viewed very favorably by Canadians. In fact, according to studies, 96% of Canadians believe museums contribute to a better quality of life. I believe I speak on behalf of all of our members when I say we were very pleased with the federal budget of February the 11th, which protected the museum programs at the Department of Canadian Heritage and also at the Canada Council for the Arts, programs that are vital to the well-being of our country's museums. There are, however, two other issues that we would like to bring forward to you today. First is Division 11, which amends the Museums Act of Canada in order to transfer responsibility for two programs, the Virtual Museum of Canada and Online Works of Reference, to the Canadian Museum of History. Particularly, we are concerned that there was a lack of consultation. We did not see this decision coming, and there are a number of subsequent questions that we are waiting clarity on. As a national museum, the Canadian Museum of History is a world-class institution that adheres to the highest professional standards. We applaud its mandate of raising the profile of Canadian history and have no doubt about its capacity to deliver on these programs being transferred to it. Our concern refers to section or provision 193. Subsection 3, which states that the Museum of History may support other museums or organizations that have a purpose that is complementary to its own. On the positive side, the transfer of these programs does represent an opportunity to renew and broaden these programs, integrating new forms of technology and helping the programs move forward. We do not want to see these programs be narrowed. We want to ensure that our nation's heritage is not restricted to historical artifacts or archival materials as per the museum's role, but also through art, science, oral history, and other forms of culture. We argue for this very broadest definition possible. I should also just go on to talk a little bit about the Virtual Museum of Canada because it's an important program that supports museums across the country, and it teaches them the process of developing online exhibits as well as helping to digitize museum collections. We need to ensure that it and the other program being transferred are inclusive and accessible to the whole community. A second matter of concern to our community are recent changes to the Cultural Property Review Board in this budget. This is a very valuable program which assists in the protection of cherished historical items and encourages the growth of private giving in Canada. In the last 2 reported years, the board's permits and actions resulted in over 34,000 items of outstanding significance and national importance, valued at over $178 million in tax credits being saved for the public good in our museums and galleries.
1 minute.
On February the 11th, the federal budget effectively closed down one donation model that some taxpayers had used. Some have used favorable tax treatments, fluctuations in values, exemptions from capital gains to their advantage, all very legal activities. These shelters are now ineligible under the program. Some professionals are wondering where this what further changes may be coming. The next part in Bill C-31 sees the authority of the Cultural Property Review Board being transferred from the Minister of Canadian Heritage to a new administrative tribunal. Again, there was no consultation. We were not aware of this change, and we are wondering where is all of this leading. Assurance is badly needed for the integrity, openness, and the long-term stability of the Cultural Property Review Program. We thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. We'll now hear from Mr. Thomas, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. We welcome this opportunity to present to you on behalf of our 84,000 supporters across Canada, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, Canada's oldest and largest taxpayers advocacy organization. We realize that following the first ever appearance by the leader of the official opposition by a parliamentary committee is a tough act to follow. So I understand that it's now mandatory to lead with some kind of Latin. So I'd like to say "Boni pastores estandere pecus non deglubere," which the Emperor Tiberius advised his regional governors that it is important to shear the flock of sheep and not to slaughter them, in reference to taxation policy. So we bring you that reminder in the spirit of the day, and in the spirit, the new spirit of reviving classical languages at Commons Committee meetings. And with regard to that, the debate around Canada, the future of Canada's supply of workers, we remain troubled that since the financial meltdown of 2008, the average Canadian couple, each of them earning $50,000 at least, are between them and their employers, they are sending $934 a year more to Ottawa in employment insurance payroll taxes than they were at the onset of the recession. We think that Parliament ignores the fact that this money is coming right off people's paychecks. You know, it is diminishing their disposable income, and it is making it more difficult for a consumer-led recovery that generates employment prosperity. It makes it tougher for Canadian families. We think that the absolute first order of business with a family-friendly tax relief in the coming budget has to be getting these payroll taxes back into line and getting this program under control. But by the government's own projections, the government is expecting to bring in at least possibly $5.5 billion more in employment insurance payroll tax revenue than goes out in benefits. And 11 cents of every dollar, for every dollar of payroll tax revenue that's collected, the government's spending 11 cents on administration. Now, how does this affect Canada's labor markets? We just had a story today of a boat maker in New Brunswick who moved to Maine, and he cited employment insurance regulations as one of the biggest aggravating factors. You know, a young person today can work 26 weeks in any major Canadian city, whether it's Halifax or Moncton or Calgary or Vancouver. They won't even get their contributions to the EI fund back. You know, people who are working and making working people's wages. They don't even get their contributions back. And yet, in some of these economic regions, someone can work the identical number of hours and get $17,000 in EI benefits. Well, no wonder we're having a hard time filling job vacancies in Canada when, depending on your postal code, you can get $17,000 in benefits when someone living in a major city where there is work gets nothing. They don't even get their contributions back. It's an injustice. We urge this committee to tackle that issue.
Mr. Thomas, we'll go to Mr. Campbell, please.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I, for one, will not be complaining about the heat after the winter we've had in Prince Edward Island. My name is Blair Campbell. I'm the General Counsel and Corporate Secretary for Prince Edward Island Mutual Insurance Company. I come to you in this capacity, but I also sit on the Executive Committee of the Canadian Association of Mutual Insurance Companies. I'm here today to address Division 14 of Part 6 of Bill C-31 that provides, in part, rules to enable the conversion of mutual insurance companies to capital stock companies, which is otherwise known as demutualization. I come to you to express grave concern over this decision and to explain the impact that these rules may have on our companies and in particular on rural Canada. Our company, Prince Edward Island Mutual Insurance Company, is one of 100 mutual insurance companies serving in the property casualty insurance market in Canada. Our company, like many of our sister mutuals, were formed by farmers between 100 and 175 years ago out of need in the farming sector and for rural property owners to provide insurance that was not adequately serviced by stock companies. Mutuals are still relevant today in rural Canada. Most of our companies are based in small Canadian towns. We have boards that consist of local farmers and business people. We serve local residents, make decisions locally, and serve the needs of many rural Canadians. Our companies were founded on principles of mutuality and sharing. They were not formed based on capitalistic principles or ideals of individual property rights. As mutualists, we believe that the assets of a mutual insurance company are a common good. They are indivisible. The surplus of our companies has been built up as security for the policyholders over many generations. This surplus was not accumulated to become the property of a particular generation. Members of the company do not have any direct or even notional ownership rights in the assets of the company, as when they leave, there is no payment of a share in the company. The surplus is held for the policyholder's benefit while they are a mutual policyholder. The best examples of proper disposition of the surplus of a mutual are in Quebec with cooperatives, where when they convert, the assets of the cooperative will stay in the cooperative federation or system. And in France, if we're looking for precedent, policyholders voting on a demutualization proposal must also vote on the disposition of the surplus, which must be to a continuing mutual, company or companies or charity. A demutualization decision by the policyholders of the day will be made out of self-interest. It won't be made out of acknowledgement of the sacrifice of or contribution of prior generations or the interests of future generations that will be served by mutuals. If enabling laws are made, our companies will be at risk for conversion for the purpose of expansion of existing stock companies with predatory ambitions of growth. Mergers and acquisitions professionals will become skilled in lucrative practices, converting mutual companies to stock companies. And I'll just give you the example of the life companies. When the rules were made, the life companies served 50% of the life insurance market. And life companies are different than our property casualty companies, but now they serve less than 5% of that market. It may be impossible to monitor and defend against the predatory and greed-based motivation from the examples I've given you. We are at the precipice of a decision that may have the effect of gutting the mutual industry in Canada. This will have irreversible effects on our companies and the cost of insurance services provided to Canadians, especially rural Canadians.
Okay. 1 minute, please.
It's valid for government to say no to the circle of self-interest and refuse to create enabling laws. It is preferred that no enabling rules be established. But if there are to be enabling rules, it is vital to get them right. These decisions should receive the highest level of scrutiny within the company, with supermajority quorum and approval thresholds. In Ontario, there's a 90% requirement on this question. The surplus of the company should remain in the mutual insurance system. Questions on a demutualization should be addressed by government as opposed to deferring to the courts. Not passing disrespect to the courts, I have the utmost respect for them, but politicians with public input are best suited to set public policy, especially in novel areas of the law, as opposed to deferring to the courts. And I'll say finally, number 4, government should pass a law requiring that all policyholders of a mutual are considered a mutual or voting member of the company. And that will solve the problem with 4% of the mutuals where they have gotten themselves into a distorted ownership picture with narrow mutual ownership situation. There is one company who has 800,000 policyholders that suggests that they have 1,000 mutual policyholders. They have $1.6 billion in surplus, and this company is the principal driver of these rules.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Campbell. We'll go to Mr. Reid now, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have covered a lot of ground on this panel already, I can see. I will cover a couple topics, but I am happy. I've heard also a lot of discussion around temporary foreign workers in previous sessions. I'd be happy to talk about that in the questions if need be. It's my pleasure to be here on behalf of the Progressive Contractors Association of Canada to share our perspective on Bill C-31. PCA represents and supports progressive unionized employers in Canada's construction industry. Our member companies employ approximately 30,000 skilled tradespeople unionized primarily by the Christian Labour Association of Canada. In Western Canada, we account for about 40% of all natural resource industry construction. And where provincial regulations best support the hiring and training of young workers in Western Canada, registered apprentices comprise over 35% of the total PCA workforce. But despite our leadership in the recruitment and development of new tradespeople, PCA member companies, like most companies in Canada's construction industry, continue to struggle to find enough workers to meet growing demand. This is particularly pronounced in BC, Alberta, and Saskatchewan. It's in this context that I want to express PCA's strong support for the measures within Part 6 of Bill C-31 and to share our thoughts on how these measures fit in a broader plan for addressing Canada's workforce development challenges, both today and into the future. It starts with promoting and enabling skills training and apprenticeship in Canada. There are numerous barriers to entry for Canadians considering a career in the trades. These barriers include cost, proximity to employers and training providers, and family circumstances. The Canada Apprentice Loan, announced in the 2014 budget, is a welcome step towards tackling some of these issues. For many of our prospective employees, the loan will help cover a variety of hidden costs of transitioning from a low-opportunity career path or occupation into the skilled trades. The cost of new tools and equipment, for example, transportation costs, income supplementation during technical training, just to name a few. It's our hope that once implemented, this program will be flexible enough to accommodate someone who decides to change trades early on in their apprenticeship journey, but at the same time, the program should maintain enough focus to facilitate improved completion rates. While these sorts of investments in apprenticeship will help the longer-term landscape, they will not help our companies address the immediate acute skills shortages we are experiencing in certain regions and occupations. We must also look abroad to fill those gaps. PCA supports the balanced approach of the federal government reflected in Bill C-31 pertaining to immigration. Our members are particularly excited about the potential of the express entry system, not only for recruiting high-demand tradespeople, such as heavy equipment operators and welders, but also hard-to-find corporate professionals, including engineers, project managers, and estimators. We'll continue to work closely with the federal government on the development and implementation of this new system. Before I conclude, I do want to highlight one other area around which we believe more can be and should be done, namely to better facilitate the mobility of workers in Canada from regions of high unemployment to regions of low unemployment. One solution we believe the federal government should take a closer look at is the creation of a work travel grant or a lump sum training and mobility grant accessible through the EI system. Mobility grants allow a person who is unemployed in one area of the country to utilize future employment insurance benefits in the form of a lump sum payment in order to relocate to another area of the country where workers are needed. The funds advanced from the EI payments would then be used to fund job search, training, and relocation costs. In conclusion, PCA thanks the committee for this opportunity to share our views on Bill C-31, and I'd be happy to take any questions you have.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation, colleagues. The first 4 members will go with 7-minute rounds, so we'll start with Ms. Sims, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and it is really a pleasure to be here today. My questions are going to be directed toward Ms. Jensen-Young, and I want to thank both Ms. Nelson and Ms. Jensen-Young for appearing before us today, but more so for their courage. More so for their courage. When the story broke of what had happened to them, it's a story that's reflected, by the way, from coast to coast to coast. And I can tell you that you became well-known household faces, and everybody knew the story, and it galvanized Canadians and pointed out to them the kind of abuses that do exist. And after the story broke, the Minister of Employment and Social Development was quoted as saying, "Our message to employers is clear. We will not tolerate any abuse of the temporary foreign worker program." And he went on to say, to ensure that Canadians are first in line for available jobs and to ensure that employers do not take advantage of foreign workers. So in this context, I have a series of questions for you, and I would really appreciate yes or no answers because time is very limited. Did the minister blacklist your employer?
No.
Who is currently working at the restaurant? Canadian residents or citizens, or are they temporary foreign workers with LMOs? More than yes or no on this one.
There are 3, we believe, part-time Canadians, and the rest that are employed there.
How many are the rest?
There would be 6, I believe, and they're either on contract or landed immigrant.
Thank you. Have you heard from the minister or his office by phone?
No.
Okay. Have you received anything personally in writing from the minister's office?
No.
Okay. Did you receive a form letter from the Department of Employment and Social Development stating that the ESDC takes the integrity of the temporary foreign worker program seriously and will not tolerate any abuse of the program?
Yes.
Thank you. And would you suggest that the fact that the government has done absolutely nothing about the abuse you reported well over a month ago, a story that was splashed on the front pages of newspapers and covered almost every visual media outlet as well, is in fact the government tolerating abuse of the program?
Yes.
Okay. If you could ask anything or say something to the Minister for Employment and Social Development if he was sitting here, but I'm sure he will get this message, or if you did get to meet him with him face to face, what would you want him to know, or what question do you want answered?
There's one question we want answered, and where's our investigation? And can you explain to us how this is right, how this is not wrong by your guidelines set out for this program?
Thank you very much. What I'm gathering from you is that you warned the government about this employer,
yes,
yet the status quo remains at that restaurant. I find actually that quite heart-wrenching because you're seeing a place where you worked. Other people are working there and you are not. And it's really heartbreaking. And yet you were good employees. You'd been there for a long, long time, both of you. You took a big risk in coming forward with this story, a big risk, and I want to thank you for it. Can you tell me, what have job prospects looked like for you since you very bravely came forward on this?
I was offered a job in another establishment, but the offer has since been rescinded. due to the fact that they employ foreign workers. And I am obviously not wanted in that respect.
So just to be clear, you were offered a job by this other place,
Yes.
but then they rescinded the offer because they said they had temporary foreign workers on site.
In not so many words, but they made it obvious that the offer was not there anymore.
Thank you very much. Recently, the CEO of McDonald's said the following in response to the news story that its franchises turn away Canadian applicants to bring in cheaper foreign labor. And your colleague actually talked about a situation and described that, because you've seen that happen. You've seen that happen, and you've seen how it gets treated. And this is what the CEO had to say. This has been an attack on our brand. This has been an attack on our system. This is an attack on our people. It's bull. I used those words when I described my conversation with the minister last week. He gets it. Bett says he was incredibly impressed with the minister, adding he really knows his stuff, and I'll say he knows his stuff from a business person's perspective. Yes, they are disenfranchised. Some of them don't work for us anymore, but in the scheme of things, it doesn't matter. This story has been brewing for a lot of years, and you know, at the end of the day, we just happened to be the business that got tapped into it, and we weren't the first. Can you tell me, after your experience, what does hearing comments like that feel like?
It doesn't give us a whole lot of confidence. It took a lot of thinking and courage to finally come out and do what we have done, not just for ourselves, but for all Canadians that find themselves in this position. And we are very disappointed that, you know, we're not worth the time or the effort for this government to stand behind their words and get this investigation going.
Thank you very much. How much longer do I have?
About 30 seconds.
I've got about 30 seconds. Once again, let me tell you that your heart-wrenching story has touched Canadians. I get emotional every time I think about that. And the many, many Canadians that I hear from, and permanent residents and new immigrants who are saying it's the same for us. So thank you for your courage, to both of you. I know it's a very emotional time, and you know that we're going to keep pushing till this program gets fixed.
Thank you.
We'll go to Mr. Van Kesteren first, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for coming up. I wasn't going to go up first, but I want to respond to this. And I'll tell you, first of all, I'm listening to your story, and what I'm hearing is a very sad story, and it must be something that has been very difficult for you. But when I saw the notes today, I saw that you were coming, and so I did a little bit of investigating. So I went on Google and I tried to find the story. I found one story. It is in the paper. You're absolutely right. After that, I found nothing, so I was kind of at a loss. So I looked up the owner and I called him. So I talked to the owner. And, you know, it's so often the case. And Miss, what should I, Jennison Young? I'm not here to judge. That's certainly not my job. But I can tell you that there's another side of the story. And, of course, that other side talks about having to make some changes in the status of the business, a business that got to pay the bills, got to pay the lights, got to pay all the other the costs that are incurred when runs a business. I asked him some of these pointed questions because I had your testimony. I said, I want you to answer me. I want you to tell me, because if I'm going to talk about this, I need you to tell me that you take issue with this. That's fair enough, because he's not here. Quite frankly, it's really unfair for us to make a judgment. And the other thing I should mention as well too, that we're not here to make that judgment. I want to say in the offset too that this case is being looked at this moment, and he couldn't comment on all these things because this case was before the tribunal that look after this thing. So, but he had some different numbers. He had, and I jotted them down. I think he talked about, as far as the foreign workers, you're right, there are some foreign workers that are working there, but and I'm looking for these numbers. That's why I said I wasn't supposed to be up number one. There are 3 foreign workers out of 10 in the restaurant, and housekeeping, he tells me, is half and half. Now, again, I say that because you're going to say one thing, he's going to say another thing. That's for the courts or for those to identify these things. And please understand, I'm not here to criticize you or to even to challenge you on these things, but I want this committee to understand that without having all the facts in front of us, it's pretty hard for us, because you may not even, understandably, have all those facts. That's why we're going to look at these things. I want to say as well, too, that the minister is very concerned about this, and this issue is being investigated. And we have introduced laws within the temporary worker program that if abusers are found, that they will be charged. So I can assure you that that's the case. Very quickly, I want you, do you know what the unemployment rate in your neck of the woods is?
Not particularly, no.
Okay, it's 3.1. One of the reasons, and we've had this discussion amongst the different panel members, this is what makes it so difficult. There are those that say, for instance, maybe in Mr. Keddy's neck of the woods, we need these people in the fishing industry. And then there'll be those that say, no, you've got a high unemployment rate, you don't need them. There are people in Mr. Reid's end of the world that say, we've got to have these people. There's 3%. That's virtually nothing, by the way. Economists, when they talk about 3%, that's unemployment. There is no unemployment. So there is a reason to have the program, as far as, and I don't want to get into too many technical explanations to you, but as far as evaluating and administrating the program, when we have regions in our country that have virtually no labor pool, we have to administrate. So 2 things I wanted to say. First of all, we don't have Mr., and I have his name here somewhere too, Mr. Cyranois or something like that. He's not here to defend himself. The other thing is that we are investigating this. I want to thank you too for coming up, but I just wanted to be able to say that because I think we don't have the whole side of the story. So anyway, thank you, Mr. Reid. How much time do I have yet, Chair?
Order.
Does the witness get to answer, Mr. Chair?
No, I didn't answer your
Order. As members know, the time allocated to members is the members' time. I mean, Mr. Van Kesteren, do you want to move on, or do you want?
How much time do I have?
You've got 2 minutes.
Oh, good. Well, I want to talk to Mr. Reid.
Okay.
I want to talk about the foreign worker program. I want you to tell us the other side of the foreign worker program, what you're experiencing in your neck of the woods, which is the same neck of the woods, which has a severe labor shortage. Can you maybe just tell this committee?
Sure. Our contractors are industrial, now small, medium, and large, but industrial contractors building the resource sector in Western Canada. We don't have, these are companies with workforces in the thousands. We don't search for just one welder. We search for 50 or 100 welders at a time, or 200 welders in some cases. So when a project ramps up, we go to every extent possible to first look in the immediate area, so if we're talking about Fort Mac, for example, in that area, we'll look in the Fort Mac area. We'll then look in Calgary and Edmonton. Then we'll look in BC and ultimately out east as well. But the reality is, to ramp up for some of these projects, there just aren't enough welders at the scale that we're talking about in terms of the demand on contractors to address those needs in the time frame that we have. So we support all the work and investment that the government is making on developing apprenticeship, but we have an immediate problem. If we want to continue to keep these projects moving at a prosperous and efficient rate, we have to get more people in here, and that's what the temporary foreign worker program actually helps us do.
Okay, you've got 10 seconds.
Very quickly, the fact that you're pulling the labor pool this is affecting every aspect of labor, I would assume, from the skilled to the unskilled.
It is certainly, I would say it's primarily the high skilled, but certainly there are skills at all, the general labor, in some circumstances we're short of as well, but definitely we're feeling the pinch of the higher skilled labor.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Van Kesteren. Mr. Kuzner, please.
Thanks very much, and I'll try to be, if we could be fairly quick, because we only have 7 minutes, but just Mr. Thomas first. You know, we prefer to shear the sheep than slaughter them, but if the wool is used to pull over our eyes, then, then we get a little testy. So I know you wouldn't want to do that. But if you could, just a quick comment on your references that the deduction for EI, the premiums paid, is really an indirect tax. Some argue it would be best used to invest in skills training. Others say job creation if it goes back to employers. Just a quick thought on that.
We would prefer that the money be left in the pockets of working Canadians to go out and spend in the economy, because, you know, the overhead costs, the administration, 11 cents for every dollar that makes it into the pocket of a recipient. Mm-hmm. It's unheard of. And I mean, that supports the economy in the national capital region, obviously, but it's not an efficient system. It should be reformed.
But you see it as an indirect tax, really.
Oh, it's the most direct tax, because you can't shelter it by putting money into retirement savings or I mean, it's a regressive payroll tax, and it has an immediate effect diminishing consumer spending in Canada.
Okay,
which
I'm going to cut you out. Just I want to get a little question in on everybody. Thanks. Okay, Ms. Jennison Young, and I want to first identify Ms. Nelson. In her comments, she referred to the situation that the temporary foreign workers found themselves in, and the uncomfortable situation in doing household chores and what for the employer. So I really respect the fact that you've taken into consideration their well-being. You were all let go on the same day, temporary foreign workers, and you folks, you weren't, or you guys were let go and the temporary foreign workers were kept on.
Well, we're not sure of that. We all got a formal written notice of discharge saying they were discharging all staff.
Okay.
At the time, they said the contract workers would get a different letter later. This is one of our questions for Mr. Kenny, because if we were all discharged, and as the letters state, all staff has been discharged, and we will interview those we want to come back and work for us, our question then becomes, if you do fire or lay off temporary foreign workers, Service Canada needs to be notified, ROEs need to be printed out, and new LMO applications need to be applied for. So that was the process in which everyone was fired.
Yeah,
we don't.
But the temporary foreign workers are, and with absolute respect, I know Mr. Van Kesteren to be an honourable member, and I know he wasn't trying to imply anything by where he was going with his questioning. But they are doing the same work that you guys were doing. That work is being done by temporary foreign workers now.
Absolutely, and you're right, we can't get that information on who is on contract and who is not. All I would like to say to his question was, if he's saying there's only 2 or 3, or it doesn't matter, they still have their jobs. Ms. Nelson and I do not.
Thanks very much. If I could, Mr. Reid, how much are your members spending now on skills development apprenticeship?
I don't have the immediate number handy, but it would be well into the, it's a significant portion. Virtually all of our members pay into...
You guys do track that, though?
We do, yeah. We all pay into a training fund that is robust.
And participation rate is, most of your members would be involved in the apprenticeship and training?
About 95%.
What about your commitment to hiring apprentices?
35% of our workforce is apprentices.
35, is that
throughout Western Canada? The ratios in Ontario don't allow us to do 35%, but where we can, we have 35% apprenticeship.
So obviously, with the increase in the number of temporary foreign workers, I would imagine that the amount of money invested in training over the last 6 years would have increased considerably as well.
In our sector, there's no question. I mean, we really, you know, our membership invests substantially in training. We've been very supportive of the work that the federal government has done on training in the recent budgets. But at the end of the day, again, we're talking about significant economic enterprises out west that require a scale of workforce that we don't have.
Mr. Chair, how are we doing for time there? Oh, great. Okay, maybe one more question. The job grant, what percentage of your members will access the job grant and utilize the job grant?
Our expectation is it will be substantially leveraged by our membership. That's certainly what PCA has been a strong supporter of it.
If I could, Mr. Campbell, if I could go to you with regard to the whole situation around demutualization. You know, we're seeing our rural communities just sort of gutted, really, for a couple of different reasons. What kind of impact is this going to have on small communities across the country?
Well, 1 minute. I know that the availability of insurance affects the availability of credit to buy properties, to improve properties, farms, businesses, and whatnot. It will have a, you know, if the mutuals aren't there to provide the services that they currently provide.
Is there a risk they could be snapped up by outside buyers and, you know,
that's
they just sort of galvanize around one service provider?
Yes.
The moms and pops are gone, and the big box providers are the ones that.
That's right, and decisions will be made on,
yes,
you know,
outside
on a different street. It won't be made on Main Street in Summerside. It'll be made in Bay Street, perhaps, and you know, the decisions are made differently on that basis. So, and I know from our own experience, you know, pricing is a big factor, especially in the rural areas. So,
great.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kuzner. We'll go to Mr. Saxton, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to our witnesses for being here today. I'd also like to begin by recognizing and thanking Mrs. Jennison Young and Mrs. Nelson for being here today. I was, as many people were, moved by their story, and I want to assure you that our government is serious about reforming this program and to make sure that Canadians do come first. That's extremely important. I'd just like to ask you, what do you think about the proposed penalties that we've proposed to employers who abuse the program?
You'll have to let me know. What
okay. But you do agree, though, that employers who abuse the program should be penalized?
That's right, and that's what the federal guidelines say, that they will be penalized, blacklisted, fined, you know, but we don't know what that means or what that looks like.
Okay, but the new legislation is going to be significantly tougher,
right,
on employers.
Yes.
So that we can crack down on employers who are abusing the program. So I would assume that you would be supportive of a move of that nature.
Oh, absolutely, because I truly believe that if it's, you know, if there's consequences to these actions, then, you know, people will think twice about abusing this program, whether it be towards Canadians or the temporary foreign workers themselves.
Right. And it's our understanding that the opposition is actually going to be opposing our proposal to strengthen the penalties against employers. So I'm sure you're surprised to hear that as well, I'm sure.
Well, you know, I'm here because of the issue I'm here for, and you know, we are here to support tougher sanctions and more blacklisting, and, you know, let's see some of these fingers actually get slapped so that they don't do it again. That's what I'm here to support.
Good. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. My next question is for Sean Reid. Mr. Reid, there's a strong relationship between educational programming and the skills demanded by industry. And this skills matching is critical not only to the success of our students, but also to our graduates' ability to be immediately productive upon entering the workforce. and as a result, various stakeholders and businesses have called for the loosening of restrictions for entering the skilled trades. Budget 2014 provided, as you know, over $100 million for the new Canada Apprentice Loan Program, providing tens of thousands of apprentices with access to interest-free loans. Do you support the government's investments in the skilled trades as a part of the diverse strategy to create jobs and economic opportunities for young Canadians?
We absolutely support the government's focus on the skilled trades. If you'd like, I can elaborate a little bit further.
Please elaborate, yes.
Sure.
Thanks your industry.
Really, we see three barriers in particular when we talk about people coming into the skilled trades, which we should acknowledge is probably the highest growth sector of employment in the country. First of all, it's barriers to perception. And what I'm talking about there is, frankly, people think skilled trades are for dummies, that smart people go to universities, dummies go to skilled trades as a last resort. Some of the initiatives that the government, and clearly the tone that the government has been setting over the last several years, is one that rejects that presupposition, and we support that. Second is barriers to entry, whether it's cost. In some cases, I should say, there's significant provincial barriers in terms of apprenticeship ratios, the expansion of compulsory trade certification. We support the minister's work on bringing these provinces together to discuss those barriers and hopefully bring them down. And the third is really the barrier to mobility. That's the third issue we see a lot of, is we have tradespeople in southern Ontario, in parts of the Maritimes, that for one reason or another, it is too prohibitive to move to where the employment opportunities really are in the West, for example, or perhaps in northern Ontario. And that's the one area where we want to encourage the federal government to continue to focus its attention on facilitating even greater mobility of people to moving where the employment opportunities are.
Thank you. And then just one more question on the temporary foreign worker program. As you know, and it's been discussed here today, our government has proposed significant changes to reform and improve the temporary foreign worker program. And I'd just like to ask if you agree with those proposed changes.
We do. We think it's a balance. The approach that the government is taking on the temporary foreign worker program is balanced. And we particularly want to continue to encourage the federal government to focus on a temporary foreign worker program that addresses the acute skills shortages in specific occupations and in specific regions.
Thank you very much. Chair, how much time do I have?
You have about a minute and a half.
Terrific. Thank you. My next question is for Gregory Thomas. Gregory, welcome. Would it be your assessment that the amalgamation of government bodies such as ACOA and ECBC is an effective way of providing government services while respecting taxpayer dollars?
Yes, we certainly wholeheartedly support these reforms, and with the administrative tribunals as well, and the administrative tribunal support services.
Okay. And as you know, since coming to government, we've reduced taxes in just about every single way that Canadians pay taxes, in fact, over 180 different ways, including reducing red tape on businesses with the one-for-one rule, for example. Do you support our reforms of cutting back on red tape?
Yes, we do, and we've consistently supported the tax reductions that have come forward. We're particularly excited about, as the government enters surplus, prospects of additional tax relief in next year's budget.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Saxton, Monsieur Caron, pour 5 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Merci beaucoup. And once again, as my colleague Ms. Sims said, thank you to Ms. Nelson and Ms. Jennison Young for the courage, but also to bring this testimony. I'd like to go back quickly on something that Mr. Van Kesteren mentioned, and I'll be paraphrasing because I don't have the exact formulation, but basically, after contacting the owner of the business, the owner of the business basically said, well, we are in a tough business situation right now, and we have difficult decisions to make. That sounds a lot to me like you're paid too high and we'll fire you so that we can actually find a way to get
Point of order,
people
Chair.
lower.
Point of order. I don't want to blame it, but I did not say that, so you
I
need to go back to
I'm not saying you did. I'm saying that I'm paraphrasing the owner that you talked to in your comments.
Okay.
So that's.
I did not say that.
Let's refrain from members saying what other members said.
I'm not saying that Mr. Van Kesteren said. I'm saying that's what the owner that he talked to, and people will be able to refer to the answer because it's on record. So I'd like to for Ms. Jennison Young to actually confirm to me if that's what happened there. Basically, you got fired, and justification that was given to you was?
We were given no reason at all.
Okay.
We were just dismissed.
And we'll see on the record what the reason given by the owner when you talked to me, Mr. Van Kesteren was. I know you were brought into procedure and to wonder how things happen. Mr. Saxon knows very well that we are going to be voting on the over 300-page bill right now. Some of the things we'll be voting in favor in committee. Some will be voting against, but we'll be stuck in the House having one single vote on over 300 pages of legislation, of which temporary foreign workers will be about 2 pages. So that's the way it works. J'aimerais revenir peut-être avec Mr. Campbell.
I'd like to come back to Mr. Campbell then with this question of demutualization. Mr. Campbell, I'd like to know whether you're familiar with the case where there was a session here on demutualization in the Finance Committee, and there was a great deal of discussion of the case of Economic Mutual Insurance Company. I'd like to know whether you're familiar with the situation.
Familiar with the situation, yes.
Est-ce que vous pourriez la résumer peut-être en...
Could you sum it up for us so we can understand what was at issue? I know it's a very complex matter.
It is our understanding that the Economical Mutual wishes to demutualize. They currently have, like I said, 800,000 policyholders. However, less than 1,000 of them claim to be mutual policyholders, which are the members are the owners of the company. And I talked about the property rights issue earlier in my presentation, but a demutualization of Economical with $1.6 billion in surplus plus the value of the business as a book of business, the value to each of those 1,000, less than 1,000 policyholders would be significant. And
the end result then is that there are less than 1,000 holders of mutual policy, and there was a large number of insurance policyholders. The demutualization would have had the effect that each of the mutualists, that is, those that have mutual policies, would have benefited. They've accumulated 120 years, 1.6 million each, whereas the people that had a normal policy would, in fact, have been left out, so to speak.
I think that's the original intent. I don't know what their intent is now, and of course, their intent will be guided by the laws and regulations that are put in place by government.
Knowing the situation and knowing what the Economic Mutual Insurance Company was at the time, could you tell me what the impact of the legislation would be as you see it on the situation that we saw in the past if the proposed legislation were to be applied?
If the proposed legislation is opening the door to creation of regulations. So the regulations will further define what those rules look like. One of the provisions in the bill that's under consideration deals with the minister's ability to defer questions and perhaps ownership questions to the courts. And it's my view that this is a decision that is really a public policy decision that needs to be addressed with public input instead of a technical legal argument on a novel area of law. I think Parliament is best suited to deal with the question.
Okay, thank you. Merci. We'll go to Mr. Kelly, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome to our witnesses. And Mr. Campbell, just picking up on that thought that the rules surrounding demutualization and ownership rules would be better made by political entities rather than judicial ones. I just find that a little bit surprising because most of the time when it comes to the division of property and assets, that ends up being a court-regulated process anyway.
The court may take a strict property rights interpretation, whereas When you look at, you know, the creation and formation of Economical Mutual, or any mutual for that matter, what was the intent of that surplus? What was the intent of the ownership? How did the ownership structure wind up at 1,000 members? You know, like, I think you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah,
do you?
no,
Yes,
that's an interesting statement, but I don't think we can take it just on a single case. I mean, obviously, for mutualized companies and insurance companies in this case, there has to be a process for demutualization, and that process has to be fair and equitable, and allow shareholders to be able to get their assets, if they have assets in the company, out of the company, and that's what's intended in the budget bill. I do take a little bit of exception to, you made a comment about mutual insurance companies being the only insurance companies for rural Canada. You know what, I farmed for 25 years and used a mutual insurance company in Atlantic Canada and had great service, and I had a great agent, but you know, I still run a small, very modest little small farming operation, but I don't use a mutual insurance company anymore. I didn't get anything for my assets that I invested with the company, and my insurance is cheaper. So, and I have more of it. So there's two sides to that, and I think that needs to be put on the record, that there are other companies, and you know, in this case, I think competition is, whether it's good or bad is not for us to decide, but it's fair.
Yes. I know in our experience as a mutual company, we are a company that are interested in business, or will consider business, that stock companies do not, or other insurers do not. And in your case, you may be a very favorable risk, and oftentimes stock companies, big companies, like to cherry pick risk. So that may be a compliment to you.
But for example, and every farmer faces this, the difference in insuring my tractor for the highway, because everybody needs PL&PD in order to go on the highway with a farm vehicle, under a mutual insurance company, under a private insurance company, was considerably cheaper, almost half. So it's not, every case is separate, is what I'm trying to say. I appreciate your testimony, but I want to put that on the record. I want to go back to the, find my notes here. John McAbady for the Canadian Museums Association. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's not 30 seconds. I'll still attempt my question. Two entities that are out there, the Virtual Museum of Canada with that online presence, and the Canadian Encyclopedia of Music and the Directory of Canadian Biography. These are newer online resources that never used to exist. They have comprehensive information in them, available now to all of Canada's museums, and to assist in the development of those. How accessible are they to your organization? How often do you use it, and how important is it to you?
Okay, thank you.
They're public programs. They're not new programs. They've been in existence for a number of years, and they are available to all Canadians. They're open and accessible. So that, to us, is a very important asset. And our concern is simply in the transfer to the Museum of History. Are they going to be bound by narrower criteria that is the role of the Museum of History, or will they be broader to include art, natural science, history, technology, other disciplines, other subjects? We would argue for the broadest possible application.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Keddy. We'll go to Ms. Sims, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. So my question is going to be back to Ms. Jennison Young again. So let me see. The government has reduced red tape, which has meant that the temporary foreign worker program has now ballooned to well over 350,000. Almost every day, in the media, we're seeing stories of abuse, and more people came forward today, as was witnessed on TV. You lived in this community for a long time, yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah. You've been a long-term employee, yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. You were laid off?
Dismissed, yes.
You were dismissed. You're not employed, but the temporary foreign workers who were working at the time, through no fault of their own, by the way, it's not their fault. They are employed, right?
Right.
Right. Thank you. And do you have bills to pay, or did your bills just stop the day that you lost your job?
No, ma'am, I have bills.
So you have bills to pay.
Yes.
So what we have here is a situation where you have a Canadian person living in a community for a long term, not working through no fault of their own, and instead what we have is an employer who's brought in workers who he can treat in a very different way because they are vulnerable. Thank you. Over to my colleague.
Thank you. And I just want to also say, appreciate very much your being here, Ms. Jennison Young. And I want to say that we've heard today that the minister is very concerned about how the temporary foreign worker program is going. Have you been told by any federal officials that any new laws would be made backwards in time to fix your situation?
No.
Okay, I'd like to ask a question of Mr. Thomas. First of all, Mr. Thomas, welcome. Nice to see you again, and thank you for raising the tone of the debate with a Latin phrase to begin. That was very, very good. And I also appreciate your efforts with the giant balloon of Senator Duffy across Parliament Hill recently. That was very, very funny as well. I wondered, you've heard from Ms. Nelson and Ms. Jennison Young today. And on behalf of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, do you think what you've heard is either fair or good public policy for Canadians?
No.
Okay, thank you. And I wanted to ask now to Mr. McAvity. Your organization is an important one, and I know it well, and we've met before. I wasn't very clear about your Section 193, Sub 3, the Museum of History legislation that may support other museums if they have a complementary purpose. You weren't consulted on some changes. Could you elaborate? Because I wasn't clear on what you were suggesting.
Yeah, first of all, we were not consulted or aware of the transfer of two very major programs to the Museum of History. We have all the faith in the world in the Museum of History. It's a very well-run organization. The question is, what does complementary to mean? And we're arguing that that should be a very broad definition. What is history? Whose history?
Right.
Is there a beginning and an end? How do you define it? It is an elastic word.
Now, your organization, I think a number of organizations for which you speak, have hired students for internships over the years. Could you comment on any changes in federal funding that may have affected that?
Yeah, we actually have recommended before this committee that additional funds be put into internship programs. We operate on behalf of the Government of Canada what is called Young Canada Works. It is so oversubscribed. It is so important to developing skills by younger Canadians that we are turning down 90% of the employers' applications. Not of the young people, that would be a ginormous figure, but 90% of the employers, museum employers across
Why are
Canada.
you turning down 90% of the employers' applications?
Insufficient funding. Insufficient funding to meet the
and
demand
in the past,
of the program.
who has provided that funding to you?
The Government of Canada.
And they no longer provide that funding?
No, they still do. It has been consistently funded. We have started going out actively to the private sector and bringing in some corporate and private money to help with internships. That's, a major challenge for us, but at least we're showing entrepreneurship in doing that. But the Government of Canada has been investing more and more in youth unemployment. We've simply not seen any benefits from the recent $50 million and the previous $40 million that were added.
With the result that 90% are now being turned down as a consequence?
Of internships,
Okay.
yes.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rankin. I have Mr. Allen on the list.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses for being here today. Appreciate you taking the time. Mr. Thomas, I'd like to start with you, and I'd just like to ask you a few questions with respect to EI. And do you agree that in principle, and I mean in the long run, that the EI system should be financed by the premiums of the people who would be recipients of it?
Yes, we believe that training is should be part of the education system, K-12 and post-secondary. We don't believe it's the obligation of a Canadian worker to fund training programs for others off of EI payroll taxes. We also believe that EI should be similar to the Canada Pension Plan, where money comes off your check, it's invested for you in the event that you suffer a loss of employment. And if you manage to stay employed throughout your productive life, and your family, your spouse, and your dependents all manage to remain productively employed, then you get to keep those funds into your retirement.
So do you disagree with the Part 2 programs for labor training and labor market development agreements and that type of thing that we have with
Yeah, we believe that funding them off of a regressive payroll tax is bad public policy.
At the end of the day, and if you look at the budget numbers, and granted the Government of Canada did subsidize the EI premium over the downturn in the economy, it's going to be toward the end of 2015 before the EI operating account comes out of the negative position it's in. And then, as it says in it, there says, as a result, in September 2013, the EI premium rate for 2014 was frozen at the 2013 level of $1.88 per hundred of insurable earnings, and it was announced that the rate will be set no higher than $1.88 for 2015 and 2016. And in the chart, it shows it's going down to $1.47. So, in fact, over the 7-year time frame, it is going to be it will actually start to go down again in the cumulative account. So do you think it's a responsible position that we should be managing this over a period of years as opposed to just jumping the premium rate up and down?
I don't want to take too much of your time, but the previous government, between the previous government and the current government, you had a $57 billion surplus in the EI account, and the 2010 budget liquidated that surplus into general revenue.
Well, actually, it was the Liberals that did that, but
yeah. So the economy could use a shot in the arm now. Canadians have paid through the nose for a recession that they didn't create, and if you want to see economic activity and consumer spending, you should get those rates down sooner rather than later. And the fund, you're running a $5.5 billion, you're taking in $5.5 billion more in revenue this year, this current fiscal year, 2014-15, than you're paying out in benefits. So, the next budget, 2015, our strong advice would be to get that down. And, as far as the notional deficit in the EI operating account, that's all smoke and mirrors. That account was created to create a deficit.
Well, part of it's in the $5 billion deficit right now anyway. Mr. Reid, I'd like to go to you. With respect to the apprentices, you said about 35% of your people are apprentices where possible. And it struck me of some of the testimony we've heard in youth employment and other type of situations about the trades and how the inconsistencies are across provinces. And I just wanted to know, how are you partnering with community colleges, and how are you working to try to frame your block release program so that there's consistency across the country in this? Because it seems to me that some of our students are getting hung up in block release and taking them a long time to get out into the workforce.
Well, I'm not, let me try and answer that as best I can. I'm not sure that we see a ton of issue with the block release per se. I think the biggest restrictions or challenges that we face are actually regulatory at the provincial level. We have particularly in Ontario, frankly to Western Canada's benefit, Ontario is shutting out apprentices through its high apprenticeship ratios and compulsory trade certification. People are leaving to go to Western Canada. That to us is probably the strongest barrier that we're seeing in that regard.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. I'm going to take the next conservative round, unless there's no objection. I just, quick question to Mr. Reid. Mr. Reid, at the end of your presentation, you talk about a mobility grant. You say the funds advanced from EI payments would then be used to fund job search, training, and relocation costs. So would this be a repayable loan that the person who's relocating, they would sort of get an advance from EI, and then as they sort of work in their position for, say, a few months, then they pay that back? Is that how that would work?
No, it would be essentially reaching forward into your EI contributions and basically taking a lump sum in order to instead of the sort of regular contribution you get every, I don't know what it is, 2 weeks or whatever it is.
Well, this is a person who's currently collecting EI payments.
Currently collecting EI, yes.
Okay, that clarifies that. I appreciate that suggestion. I wanted to turn to Ms. Jennison Young as well. And the situation you describe and your colleague described, I mean, it's, and I don't know the particulars. I don't know the particular restaurant that is or hotel that is, but this describes clear rule breaking. This describes someone, if this is all true, that clearly broke the rules of the program in terms of not hiring Canadians preferentially, which is exactly what people are supposed to do under the current rules. And I guess what makes it is doubly upsetting for me is that I come from an area, I represent Edmonton-Leduc, an area of very low unemployment, an area that is really searching for all types of people and all types of occupations, and some very decent employers who are facing some really tough challenges, and they have maybe 5% of their workforce is temporary foreign worker, and their concern is they sort of get tarred with the same brush that the employer you're describing gets tarred with. And so, frankly, there's actually a fair amount of common ground between those employers, and I think between the policies advanced by the government, in the sense of those people who break the rules ought to be held to account. So you've made those points here today, and I fully support that, and I'll certainly follow up to ensure that that is done. It's certainly fair to ask for an investigation. With respect to the blacklist, it's fair to ask that anyone who transgresses this program be put on a blacklist. That's absolutely, the good employers frankly support that 110% as well. So there's a lot of common ground on that. I just want to go back, though, perhaps to what was mentioned earlier by Mr. Saxon, which is, I mean, this bill, in a sense, at least to me, seems to partially move in the direction in terms of what you're recommending with respect to the fines. So you're saying employers that break the rules ought to be investigated, held accountable, put on a blacklist. What this legislation will enable the government to do is to fine these companies, because if these companies then break the rules, they ought to be held to account, but they should, a surest way of punishing a company like this is to fine them very quickly so that they see there is an immediate cost to this kind of activity and acts as a deterrent to any others who are sort of thinking they should do this. So I just wanted to get you to perhaps comment on that, about the government imposing fines on those companies who do break these rules.
I understand that they want to change and make the fines more, but in all the literature that we can find, that was already something that was in place. It stated that companies that will be caught abusing the programs will be fined, possibly do criminal time, and so where our standpoint is this had already been done and the rules already been followed, then perhaps we wouldn't be finding ourselves in this situation. So just saying now that they're going to levy heavier fines, which would, how many fines have been given out in the first place?
Yeah, just to clarify, so the blacklist has been established.
Yeah,
but what this does at Part 6, it enhances the monitoring and enforcement of this program, and it enables the minister, the government, to apply administrative monetary penalties, which is a technical way of saying fines. So it will actually empower the government to levy fines, which I think you and I are in complete agreement on.
Oh, and we absolutely agree with that, that as a point, but I mean, you have to move forward and take those steps to actually use that blacklist, which still only has 4 companies on it, and impose those fines.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I appreciate that, and I look forward to seeing that'll be an interesting vote with respect to that division. But I appreciate all of you being with us here this afternoon. Thank you so much for your testimony, for responding to our questions. If there's anything further you wish the committee to consider, please submit it to the clerk. We will ensure that all members get it. Thank you so much. Thank you, colleagues. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.